Could I remind members to ensure the volume on all tablet devices is off? The quickest way to do this is press function and F8. Remind members of their obligation to declare any relevant financial or other interests in relation to today's business. And we can ignore the public gallery at this point. The meeting will be on camera. The following members have offered their apologies.
Chair, I haven't received any that I'm aware of.
Apologies for Cathal Hoyson.
Mr. O'Sheen and Mrs. Karen's coming.
Okay.
Mr. O'Sheen.
Mr. Corey's coming too.
Cheaply late.
Just the one apology. In draft minutes of the meeting on the 3rd of December, draft minutes of the meeting of Thursday the 3rd of December are at page 5. Members are agreeable that's an accurate record of the meeting.
Great.
Now, at this point we're to have a briefing on Decal, from Decal regarding the transfer of functions and then the 2016-17 budget process. Point 3.1 in your papers is the Clerk's memo on transfer of functions, page 12. Point 3.2, page 16, Decal transfer of functions briefing paper. Point 3.3, Decal budget 16-17 summary of process. Page 19. Point 3.4, OFM DFM's bill and transfer of functions order, page 28. Point 3.5, additional information on potential budget reduction scenarios across Decal business areas on page 4 of the table pack. And we have a number of officials who will be here. Slight variation between different parts of it. The transfer of function and then the budget after that.
Doesn't it? No. Almanac this morning. That's it. He can come up and swap them over just. And then he pays them. Yeah.
Right, okay, we just yes.
Yeah.
Can you move that over?
There's a personality disorder there for a moment.
Yes, sorry. I didn't realise there were 4 seats at the table.
That's it, thank you. Could I welcome then David Carson, the Director of Finance in Decal, Aidan Cassidy, the Head of Policy and Admin in Decal, and Paul Gamble, Transition Official in Decal. And later on we'll be joined by Michael O'Dowd, the Head of Finance. So if you want to make an opening statement, please go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, good morning, Chair. We very much welcome this opportunity to update the committee on Decal's role in the NICS departmental restructuring programme. We have provided a briefing note to the committee on the transfer of functions, and with your permission, Chair, I will summarise the key issues and Decal's specific role in the restructuring programme. I mean, as the committee is well aware, the Stormont House Agreement included a commitment to reduce the number of departments in time for the Assembly elections in May of 2016. Subsequently, the First Minister made a statement to the Assembly setting out the executive decisions on the names and the functions of the future 9 departments. And this was further underpinned by a fresh start, the Stormont Agreement and the implementation plan. The changes will involve a reduction in the number of departments from 12 to 9, the renaming of most departments and a reallocation of some departmental functions. The allocation of functions is set out in paragraph 2 of the committee's briefing note. In relation to Decal, its functions will form part of 3 new departments. Most of Decal's functions, except for inland fisheries and waterways, will form part of the Department for Communities. Inland fisheries functions of Decal will form part of the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. And thirdly, inland waterways from Decal will form part of the Department for Infrastructure. There's no doubt that creating a 9 fully functioning new departments involves a very challenging programme of work, spanning issues which both focus on the business of the new departments specifically and which are cross-cutting across the whole of the Northern Ireland Civil Service. It's fair to say that this represents the single biggest reorganisation of government departments here since 1999, and a structured programme has been established to coordinate and deliver the required organisational changes. In terms of the structures in place, I'll run through this. An NICAS-wide programme board was established and is overseeing at a strategic level the restructuring of the department. This is led by Derek Baker, the Permanent Secretary from DCAL. And essentially the board's role is to provide assurance to the head of the Civil Service and the Permanent Secretaries Group that all work required to create the new departments.
Sorry, Derek Baker, is he, what department is he?
He's overseeing the NICAS programme board, and that's Derek Baker from the Department of Employment and Learning.
Yeah, that's fine. Dale. Yeah.
Okay, and that all work required to create the new department is progressed satisfactorily. At departmental level, there have been 3 formation boards established to create the department for communities, infrastructure and agriculture, environment and rural affairs, and I represent DCAL on these boards. Within DCAL itself, a transition and delivery team was established, which I lead, and that basically provides a strategic focus in terms of how the department's work on restructuring has been planned. We have established a subcommittee of the board, and it has been providing strategic direction in overseeing this work, and importantly that also involves our local trade union representation. Work has been progressing through the NICAS-wide programme board and the specific departmental formation boards. The boards have set out draft visions and organisational structures for the new departments based on extensive engagement with staff and also trade unions. The designate senior staff have been announced now for each department, including the permanent secretaries, and they will be taking forward the full departmental structures in time. Within DCAL, we certainly have adopted a very collaborative approach in helping to shape the new departments, providing opportunities for local trade union side and staff to have their say. In terms of our ALBs, we have been engaging with our ALBs since the start of this process, and we're doing this through a series of meetings, including organising a specific workshop to discuss the importance of the CAL functions within the context of the new department for communities in particular. And further engagement is ongoing and planned as the restructuring programme develops. You know, as the committee is aware, the legislation to provide the basis for the new department structures and transfer of functions will be provided by the Department's Bill and a transfer of functions order, both of which are subject to Assembly consideration. And finally, Chair, this is a brief overview of the restructuring programme. We will obviously keep the committee fully informed of progress as the programme moves forward up until May, and obviously we're very happy to take questions from members.
Okay. Members have any questions they want to ask? Just David.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for your presentation, Aidan. I don't want to be sceptical, but when you're dealing with smaller departments, and obviously I've been on DCAL for some time, and you can see how it can work to the benefit of the greater people out there. When a smaller group is swallowed up into a larger group, there's always sort of losses. And I'm looking at the minute the way the 26 councils come into 11, and knowing maybe the other areas are grand, but I know in my own area we have difficulties there in the first 18 months, and you can see how it's maybe going to take a long time to get results there and whatnot. So you just feel there's maybe, how's DCAL going to manage the whole situation? Are we going to be at a loss, do you think, or what way are we going to?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question, and I understand where you're coming from. I mean, I think it's fair to say that the restructuring of Northern Ireland departments is termed a machinery of government change, you know, and therefore all functions and policies in place under the current departmental structure, in this case DCAL, will continue to be delivered under this new structure. Equally, our departmental responsibility for arm's length bodies will transfer to the new structure with the relevant function, and that's the majority of ALBs will transfer to DFC, with the exception of Waterways Ireland, which will go to the Department of Infrastructure.
But with the voluntary redundancies and that, Aidan, sorry, through the Chair and whatnot, there's going to be a certain loss of experience. How can you see it all coming together for the benefit of the sport and the arts and all the things that DCAL sort of came under the wing?
Well, I certainly believe that when you look at DCAL's track record and its capacity to be both innovative and creative, I think that we're very well placed to play a pivotal role in organisations. In terms of workforce planning, this is an issue that obviously we're giving a great deal of consideration to, and you're quite right, we have to look at what the impact of voluntary exit scheme is. I mean, I suppose that we have three primary considerations in relation to our work. The first thing is to manage the transition programme in a way that ensures business continuity and also supports staff through this change process. Secondly, and equally importantly, is to ensure that the functions under the current department play a key role and a central role in shaping these new organisations. And I think we've been very successful to date in that. When you look at the impact, particularly in terms of CAL has on society in Northern Ireland, where I think the latest figures I showed that 91% of the people in Northern Ireland use the CAL facilities. I think there is a recognition of the key role that CAL functions can play in the new organisation. I think that's accepted right across the board. We certainly see CAL functions playing a pivotal role, particularly on the social policy agenda, where for the first time ever we have all of the main social policy provisions within the one department. There's a real opportunity for joined up delivery of services and making an impact in terms of what are the real issues facing society. The executive focus now on an outcome-focused approach is the way forward, and certainly we believe firmly that when you look at the community footprint across the CAL sectors, that it can play a key role in terms of not only shaping that agenda but also in terms of delivering outcomes that matter.
I've been to some of the old party groups and I've been in some other consultation processes recently, and it's just people who are represented at various sectors and the arts and sports do come to mind very much, and they just feel they may be forgotten in the bigger and wider grouping, you know. And I think we need to just keep our eye focused on and see where other issues like fisheries going to agriculture could be a natural progression.
Absolutely.
And whatnot. So that there's stuff that people are at ease with, and there's stuff that people are just a wee bit concerned with.
Yeah.
Could just pick up there on the point that David is raising. Within the conversations that you're having, you talked there about the arms length bodies. What about the wider sector? You know, the sports organisations, arts organisations. Have there been conversations with them?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Chair. And Derek Baker, who, as I said earlier, is the chair of the programme board, has now written out to all stakeholders that are impacted in terms of the restructuring. In fact, there's a DFC event taking place next week, at which the range of stakeholders with an interest have been invited along to get a briefing in terms of the restructuring programme. I think it was important that we had the political steer in order to engage with the communities. That it was important we didn't get ahead of the politics, and I think certainly the Stormont House agreement and the recent agreement in terms of Fresh Start provided that clarity, and we're now able to go out and really engage with stakeholder interests. The whole concept of co-design is critically important in that we get the buy-in from our stakeholders in terms of how we shape both the programmes and also the delivery outcomes.
In terms of the transfer of functions, the reshaping, there's two things that occur, and I can think of it particularly in regard to language and cultural issues. There has been, I think, over the years, in terms of DCAL itself, a tendency for information, expertise, knowledge to dissipate, to people come, people go. A civil servant arrives who knows nothing about a subject, and then the previous one who did know had learned it over the last 2 years. He goes, the knowledge goes. And that's very difficult for people outside going in, because they go in and they're encountering somebody who probably knows very little about it. Maybe has come from, you know, contracts for tarmacking roads to now suddenly dealing with cultural rights or something. How do you, moving forward, make sure that there isn't some big black hole that a lot of that material and information will fall into and disappear forever?
Yeah, well, notwithstanding the impact of VES in terms of skills base, the department, in terms of looking at the organisational structure, and David has been working very closely with his HR colleagues in this, in terms of getting fit-for-purpose organisation up and running as quickly as possible. Inevitably, in any process like this, we are going to lose some of the expertise and skills base that exists there, but we are giving a lot of detailed consideration here to make sure that we do have the expertise. What I would say as part of the deal is that that the functions will transfer with the staff. So therefore, only those staff that are impacted, say, by VES. Otherwise, all of the other functions will transfer across. So we're trying to minimise any impact that may be in terms of service delivery. But there will be challenges in some areas. David, could I ask you to pick up?
Yes, I think that's right. It's very important that staff do transfer across with the function. I suppose the key issue for us has been management of the voluntary exit programme, and DCAL is losing roughly 10% of its headcount through the programme this year. Now that affects business areas to various degrees, depending on who is going to be released under the scheme. But we have been monitoring the impacts very closely and trying to make arrangements to ensure that those business areas remain fit for purpose. So where key people, for instance, have been taken out as a result of VES, we have replaced those posts, and that has been done in good time to allow the knowledge transfer to occur. Obviously, in doing so, we have had to take the funding from lower priority posts elsewhere within the structure. I suppose the other thing is that in terms of information transfer to the new department, there is a well-defined programme which is transferring the files and the information across into the new department. That's well advanced, and we don't envisage any issues there at this point in time.
My one, and I'll not pursue the point, but maybe take it up elsewhere, is again, I think over the last decade within DCAL, there have been examples of knowledge, awareness disappearing, so you're transferring a lower level body of knowledge than it should be. I think there's difficulties there, but we'll leave it for the moment.
I think, Chair, sorry, could I just maybe come in on that point? I think when you look at the impact of VES...
Thank you, Mr Humphrey, for that helpful intervention.
It primarily is impacting on the corporate services function. So the policy branches are not being significantly impacted.
Okay, thank you. Gordon Dunn.
Thanks very much, gentlemen. Thanks, Chairman. I suppose there will be many challenges ahead, and what about the resources that are needed to restructure the organisation? Have you an assurance that they will be in place to move forward?
Yeah, well, I think that's obviously a matter for the executive and future ministers in terms of that. I mean, at the moment, the resources will transfer across. David can pick up in terms of the budget for next year, you know. But I mean, if you look at, say, for example, the Department of Communities, we're looking at an organisation that probably has in excess of 9,000 staff and a budget probably between 7 and 8 billion. So it's a massive task in terms of setting up 9,000 plus staff
between the existing departments.
Yeah, that's bringing all three departments together.
Yeah.
So as to the resources in the future, I mean, I think we have the base position, and then it'll be subject to ministers.
I think, yes, we have carved out the resources that we need to manage the transition, the transfer across to the new departments. It is being done in a very difficult budgetary environment, and we'll go on to talk about that later on this morning. I think it's critical. The thing that will be critical will be the comprehensive spending review that's undertaken next year, because I think that will need to involve a fundamental look at how we deliver services and how we configure the arrangements within the DCAL family and more widely.
Okay. Right, Chair. Then there will obviously be a whole new management structure to put in place, which will be quite a challenge.
Yeah, there's considerable work ongoing on that at the moment. They're looking at an organisational structure that's fit for purpose. As I said in my opening remarks, they have identified the senior staff in each of these departments from grade 3 level up, including the permanent secretary. And there's work currently underway now in terms of designing the structure of those organisations and what's the best fit in terms of ensuring maximum delivery. The key focus in all of this is to ensure joined-up delivery of services. As I said earlier, on the social policy side, I think now that we do have the vast majority of public policies under the one minister, it presents a great opportunity to deliver that.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
William Humphrey.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. Can I just ask, David, you said 10% in terms of the staff are taking the voluntary scheme, yeah? Mm-hmm. Can I ask then, in terms of staffing implications, has there a piece of work been done in terms of the effect that will have? Will they be replaced, or will they, will the restructuring within the department be able to deal with that? And also, can I ask, in terms of savings for across government, particularly for DCAL as it moves into the new department, what about the estate in which civil servants are housed? Is that being downsized?
Okay, well, if I deal with the first point, in relation to critical staff, we are making arrangements to replace those posts. Now, that would be a minority of posts, but clearly where a post is pivotal to a particular function, we can't just exclude it from the organisation. However, we do need to ensure that the savings are achieved, and we have utilised budget in other areas to offset the need to replace those posts. The majority of posts are not being replaced, and we're making arrangements to manage that.
10% represents how many people?
About 30 people.
Right, so the department is about 300 civil servants.
Yeah.
And how many will, out of the 30, you think will
Be replaced?
critical?
There's about four posts.
And what about buildings then, and such like, in terms of the estate that the department currently has? Is any downsizing there?
Well, I think there is work ongoing in terms of the opportunities to rationalise the estate, because as David said here, in terms of a new budget round, it's critical we look at how we can reduce our overhead costs, and certainly within a number of departments, with the input from ESS and the SIB, they are looking at the estate and how they can best manage that. Because clearly, with the reduction in the number of departments from 12 to 9, there are significant savings to be achieved in terms of that cost. But also, there is a piece of work looking at all of the overhead costs in the round.
Yeah.
And I think that work will continue beyond day one, beyond May of next year, to release those efficiencies. That's going to be a work in
There will be
progress.
obviously perhaps tie-ins to if a building is leased or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it would be a false economy to not use it, I guess.
Yeah.
Can I ask then, in terms of DSD, for example, and transfer of functions to local councils, will any of you, or have any of your functions be transferring to local councils collaboratively? I'm thinking of the point that Chairman made in terms of people who are in, specialist organisations, say for in particular the arts. I know you were centring on sort of sporting, but say the arts. I mean, will there be transfer of functions to work with local councils on a greater level, or whatever? Has work been done with councils on these?
Yeah, I mean,
because obviously I make that point because the new councils, as they're formed, have greater resource. So perhaps where a council didn't have an arts department or committee or whatever, it may well do now. So to save money and duplication, I'm simply making.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately not in a position to answer the question, but I will follow up with you. I mean, that's an issue that's been taken forward by DSD in terms of their relationship with local government.
Yes.
They'll be feeding that into the new DFC model. But if the members are happy, we'll come back on that point.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Basil McRae.
So, first of all, Aidan, I'd just like to congratulate you on your turn of phrase, straight out of Yes Minister. We are very well placed to play a pivotal role. It's just tremendous, and it is important that we didn't get ahead of the politics, which is actually a rare feat in this place, to get ahead of the politics anyway. So, with that said, the key question I have about finance, in other departments that I've looked at where there's been amalgamations of departments, to and fro, we get into a rather strange position about interdepartmental transfers of funding. That some you can do it between the department, but others had to go back to DFP, be reallocated. Is there any, when we move into the Department of Communities, is there any risk of that happening?
Well, I think maybe just to thank you for your question. In terms of the Department for Communities, we're looking for, with the support of DFP, a more flexible approach to how budgets are managed, so that we provide the Minister with the maximum opportunity in terms of being able to join the dots. David, do you want to pick up the more general finance question?
Well, I think, yes, we have managed to achieve some flexibility there in relation to budget management. Certainly with the budgets all being dealt with within the one department, it should be easier to move money around.
But can I just check that I'm right in an understanding that in some departments, because they were an aggregation of previous departments, that there are some quirks about interdepartmental transfers, that some you can do and some you can't? Is that a correct statement?
Well, I think,
am I right in that? That's what I mean?
Yes, well, I think there are issues. It depends how material those transactions are. But yes, if expenditure is broadly in line with, it depends on the purpose of the expenditure and so on, and materiality as to whether it needs approval from DFP. Certainly the unit of service structure in itself is important, because within a unit of service we're not required to go back to gain approval from DFP. There's a freedom.
But if I remember correctly, I'm just not sure this is right, but whenever I was looking at DE, at the Department of Education, they had youth services as a big chunk on the edge, and if you were surrendering monies from youth services, you couldn't automatically transfer them to the rest of DE. So my worry is that, for reasons that were sort of lost in this time, so my worry is when you have a Department of Communities, which is the coming together of three departments, are there legal or regulatory issues that prevent us doing interdepartmental transfers that need to be resolved?
Well, as I say, it does depend upon the budget structure that's set up within the department. Essentially, within the units of service, a department will have freedom to move budget around. If it wants to move budget outside those units of service, whether it's to another department or even within the same department, it will require to bring those back to DFP. And the issue there is providing visibility for the executive.
Could you just define for me what a unit of service is, or give an example rather than define it?
A unit of service, well, in the new department, the decal functions will comprise one unit of service. So that means that you could take money from, or take budget from museums and employ it in sports, for example, without having to go back to DFP.
Right. So that would be that would be an existing situation where you can do that. Are there any situations within DCAL, which is a relatively modest department at this stage, where you can't do transfers?
Not within DCAL, but in moving to the new department, the unit of service will increase in size and will also incorporate other functions, the voluntary and community sector, for example. So there will be an increased freedom which we didn't have before to move money around.
So if we take with freedom, that which, obviously it's helpful in terms of being efficient, but it does provide certain challenges for a committee trying to provide scrutiny.
Yeah.
Could you just explain how the information will be, how the process might go about, so that we would know if there's being transfer of funding within a unit of service, the granularity of information that you might provide? And the follow-up question, you can take it in two halves if you like, but the follow-up question will be, whenever we look at the budget process, how does that get reflected whenever it comes in front of the estimates and the various other issues that we might be called upon to take a decision on?
Well, the way I would see this working would be in the context of monitoring rounds, and when the department is bringing information to the committee on the adjustments it is making as part of those monitoring rounds, it will highlight any transfers between, say, business areas within the department to do various things. So in that way, the committee should be able to get visibility on the various movements of budget that there are.
Do you think is that a paper that's going to come, or a statement of operating procedure? I mean, is that something that the department is going to agree with the committee? Chair?
Well, I think there would be potentially a dialogue between the committee and the department as to how that information might want to be presented.
I would like it, Chair, at some stage, might be a formal thing that we have about how we would get to know about interdepartmental or business unit changes in finance. And in particular, there's some issues about the naming of the various budgets, because a simple heading, which understandable to the department because you know what it is not clearly understood to us. So I think there is an engagement that needs to be a memorandum of understanding or something like that maybe should be looked at whatever committee is dealing with it. And then the final point is on the how does that reflect through in the estimates and the budget process, because we always get this big long thing of money put into almost groupings plucked from the air. We've been promised transparency in the budgeting and estimating process. Is there any steps being taken forward that you're aware of that would provide clarity and transparency in that regard?
I'm not aware of any major shifts now in the process. All of that would be controlled by DFP, and they really should legislate about in terms of any changes that should be made. But I'm certainly not aware of any that are forthcoming or about to be forthcoming.
I'm happy, but I would like to pick that point up later on.
Thank you. There was mention earlier of a meeting, I think it's next week, with stakeholders.
Yeah.
Would it be possible just to email through a list of who the stakeholders are that are being invited, just in case there are areas that we think maybe could be included?
We'll provide you with a copy of Derek Baker's letter plus the list of stakeholders.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you very much. I think that's the questions on the first, the transfer of functions. That takes us on then to the second aspect of this, which is the 16-17 budget. Is Michael O'Dowd?
Okay, Chair.
Oh, there he is.
If we
see him there.
change of personnel here, if you just give us a second.
Lurking in the back stalls.
Thank you. Thank you. You have
two sets of papers there that are relevant. The briefing paper, point 33, on the budget, 16-17, and then point 35, additional information on potential budget reduction, which is at page 4 of the table pack. Do you want to?
Yes, thanks, Chair.
First of all.
And thanks for the opportunity to come along and talk to you about the budget at relatively short notice. A major feature of the proposed budget process is the absence of a formal public consultation, and that's why it's extremely important that we are able to engage with the committee. And with your leave, Chair, I think it might be useful just to run quickly through what we understand is the way that the budget process is going to work for 16-17. It's a one-stage budget which will be set by DFP based on submissions from departments highlighting the impacts of cuts at two levels, and 5% and 10%. The department is collecting information from its business areas and the ALBs on the likely impacts of cuts in service at these levels. Departments will also be asked for details of any further inescapable pressures which cannot be met through reductions in funding for discretionary activities. And finally, departments will be asked by DFP for details of capital requirements. We have no timetable yet, but a paper on the process is going to the executive today, and if that is agreed, then the timescales should be clarified very, very quickly. One issue that we have is that the budget will be based on 9 departments. Culture, arts and leisure will comprise a discrete budget area within the Department of Communities, together with, as I said earlier, associated functions such as voluntary and community sector services. And we have fisheries, of course, and inland waterways, which are going to DERA and the Department for Infrastructure. The way we understand the process will work is that in allocating its budget across the new department, those new departments will take account of the views of the old departments, like DCAL. And if agreement cannot be reached, there will be a pro rata reduction applied in relation to budget changes. So, as I've said, it's very important that we are engaging with the committee as early as possible, and the Minister and the Department are committed to maximising the benefits of this consultation. Our own preparation for the budget is underway. It's not yet complete. We're still getting information in from our business areas, but we have shared with you some initial information on what we believe the impacts of cuts at 5 and 10% might be. We have also given you a very early cut of the capital position, but I should emphasise that that really is in the way of setting out markers at this stage or potential capital needs in the future. It is currently being clarified, and the position will change, but we're very keen to get your views on that, on the extent to which you think that it requires to be supplemented by additional material, or whether there are things in there which you would require clarification on. We would also be very keen to get your views on the extent to which you would wish to see areas of the department prioritised in relation to being protected from cuts. And you will remember, of course, that the Minister made the decision that libraries should be given some protection from the current round of budget reductions. Is that something, for example, you think should be sustained? In terms of how the process plays out from here, we would propose to write to you as soon as the department receives a draft savings requirement and its capital budget, and we have gone through and we've looked at our initial allocations. We would make that information available to you and invite further representations, which would inform the Minister's final decisions on allocations and our own representations to DFP. It is all being undertaken with a very compressed timetable, but it is likely that we would ask for comments shortly after Christmas, so that representations could be made before final decisions in mid-January. We will keep you updated on timelines and as we obtain more clarity following today's session at the Executive. Happy, Chair, to take questions.
Haven't anyone down for a question? David? Leslie.
Thanks, Chair. And again, thanks for your presentation on the finances. With the announcement of the sub-regional stadium project going ahead, well, the consultation through the 22nd of February, the potential then for a number of projects could well be fairly well shovel-ready. How's that viewed for the 16-17 period? Is the capital there, or is it to be spread more over the CRS period?
Well, at the moment, there in those figures that have been provided, there's 10 million in against sub-regional stadia, but a lot will depend on the consultation and what comes out of the consultation, and the degree to which the way forward or the approach adopted there is going to be changed as a result of the consultation. So
that 10 million is for the next financial year?
That 10 million would be for 16-17, but as I say, it is just a marker. It's just a very rough estimate as to what might be required, and until the consultation process is complete, it's unlikely we're going to get that really firmed up too far.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps, I don't know if it's a standing thing or not, but should declare me interest as a member of the AFA Council and ask that question, okay?
Okay, thank you.
On the casement situation as it stands at the minute, and we're probably aware of a spend to date of about £6 to £7 million. Do we need then to be looking for additional money there? Where has that money gone, or are we comfortable with the situation of the casement at the minute?
Well, it's very much dependent upon the progress in relation to the planning permission for casement. Again, at this point, we have put a marker down for next year, and that's based on the assumption that we will submit planning in the early summer of 2016, and that we're on site before the end of the year. So we have 5 million in against casement, and certainly our expectation would be that that would be met, that funding would be provided.
So having spent 6 or 7 million to date, and I know some of that is carry on, and some of it will be lost, will the 62 still be, will it need to be increased, or is there going to be a loss there?
No, at this stage we're not envisaging any increase, but that is kept under continual review. It's a dynamic situation.
Okay,
I think the overall funding envelope for stadiums remains as it was.
Okay, thank you. And if you're looking for priorities, I think the issue of disabled sports, where money was taken away and different announcements over a period of time, there would be, in my mind anyway, a priority to come back again, if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie Cree.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, gentlemen. Several sort of scenarios are painted here in the early budget papers. Right, you're talking, for example, first of all, on the 5% cut, and I see you have major risks for the arts organisations. Is any detailed work being done on that? And we've been through all this in the current year, as you know, with the cuts that were there, and there were obviously major concerns, you know, closures and all the rest of it. The 5% puts you back in the same scenario next year, and the 10% really looking like a murder picture.
Yes, that's true. The only positive thing about compared with the situation this year is that we're talking about cuts which will be implemented over the period of a year, whereas last year with the Arts Council and Sports Council we had to consider additional cuts in year, which made things a great deal more difficult. At least in this case you can at least warn organisations in advance and talk to them about the effects on the organisations. But I agree with you, the impacts of 10% are extremely serious on art organisations next year. They're still serious with 5%. But some sort of headway might be made on that figure. 10%, the implications are extremely serious.
Yeah, and without going down the whole list, libraries or another scenario.
Yes.
Public Record Office too, I see there are amber and red lights showing all around the place as well.
The problem is that we've got to the stage now where with organisations like libraries, there's no more fat left, in the sense that there's very little flexibility about spend. You've got a payroll and you've got libraries. So you get the situation where you either reduce opening hours or you actually consider closing libraries, and that's the sort of point it's reached, 10% on libraries.
Yeah, I think yes, libraries is obviously the ALBs will be taking advantage of the voluntary exit scheme to reduce their staffing levels. Libraries went through a consultation this year in relation to opening hours. Certainly they, I think, would be loath to reduce opening hours further, although I know that they've got some plans if they're asked to look at 5 and 10% reductions to perhaps reduce hours at the main libraries to around 45 hours a week. But their scope to do more than that in 1 year is very limited. Like what we are looking at essentially with libraries is a reduction in things like book stock expenditure. That is going to really hurt the level of service. It's going to inevitably lead to less people visiting libraries. It's going to have implications for Section 75 groups. It's going to mean that they're not going to be able to invest as much in material for children. And there's obviously there's knock-on implications for that. Their education programmes, and this is a feature generally of our ALBs, they're all saying that our education and outreach programmes are things that would be hit very badly in a cut scenario. So we are inevitably there will be major implications for the service, and I think that's why we do need, in the context of the CSR, really to take a fundamental look at the nature of the service, the nature and the level of the service that we provide, to see to what degree, because certainly if we're going to face continual cuts year on year, the ability of the ALB to sustain that approach, it's just going to diminish services until the organisations themselves aren't viable any longer.
Well, that actually takes me on to my next point, which sets it up quite nicely. Whilst we're looking here at a one-year budget, you've got to bring in the strategic overview, and I think that's what you're hinting there.
Absolutely.
And that's got to start, in my opinion, this year. There's no point in saying, look, we're going to manage it through this year and let the other folks sort it out. You know, I think to do the proper thing, that the strategy needs to be thought out again. Just take it on further. Where's this likely to lead? Because you can only nip and tuck for a while, and I think you say you're there. You know? So it needs some strategic planning now on the future provision of those services, period. Could I ask you about the T-Buck concerns? I see they're in there as well. Kicked this down the road for a long time, and it would be a shame to see those now just disappearing. Is that an option?
Well, I think hopefully that won't happen. T-Buck has been a real success story, and it has, in terms of the pilot programmes that have been taken forward, they have achieved very positive returns. We have secured additional funding this year to roll those programmes out further, and we would certainly be very keen to see that funding continue into next year. I think when we talk about T-Buck, we're talking about potentially the wider PETSI agenda, and it goes back to what I was saying about the educational and outreach activities of our various ALBs, which aren't funded down with this additional money from T-Buck, but it's just part of the ongoing delivery of services within those areas. And that's what could be jeopardised, or what is jeopardised in the context of budget cuts.
Again, you see that the strategic view again would be that you're creating a demand there. You're actually servicing a demand, but you're certainly increasing the demand, and you may not be able to service it, you know, down the road. And the final point is just one of my colleagues touched on it there earlier about asset realisation. I mean, there must be some consideration of that, and how, in fact, that capital that's released could be employed. Have you any thoughts on that at this stage?
Yeah, the department works very closely with DFP and SIB on the management of its assets, and I think this is somewhere where you know, we have moved. For instance, you're aware that the Arts Council moved premises relatively recently. we did an exercise looking at the various property costs, accommodation costs across the decal sector a few years ago, and it highlighted the fact that the Arts Council, what they were paying for the premises they were in was above the market rate. So steps were taken to address that situation, but there is an ongoing programme there. We do work closely with, as I say, DFP and SIB on those issues, and with the move to the new departments, should our accommodation needs reduce, then that will be taken forward in that context. That work with those bodies.
Is that not part of the work that's going on now?
Yes, there is. As I say, there is work, but it's in the context of the current department. But in the new department, as we look at overall accommodation needs and how we deliver services going into the future, there may be further opportunities.
Is there not a joint group set up in between the various departments, that are going to be taking on the...
Well, there is at the moment, but that's primarily focused on bringing the departments up and getting them up and running on May of 2016. But I think the process will go on beyond that and look at opportunities for rationalisation in the next few years, over the next few years.
I thought it would make more sense to do that at the same time. It's called strategic planning.
Well, yes, but you can't. Yes, it does take some time to develop and implement those plans.
If you started them, they'll have you yet. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah. Oh, yes. No. As I say, we are working with DFP and SIB. There is a plan in place, and we are implementing that at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just take you to page 24 for a moment in the papers? It mentions there inescapable commitments there in terms of Annex 2, bids for capital. Libraries, NI, Unitary Charge, presumably that's about Lisburn.
Yes.
Yeah. Coleraine Library.
I should say, Chair, that that's something I should have said in my opening remarks. This was an early draft, and those categories that were set out in that paper have been superseded now. We've had additional guidance from DFP in relation to what constitutes inescapable bids, and those ones that we have there wouldn't fall into that inescapable category. So please ignore the inescapable flag with those particular ones.
Well, Libraries NI is inescapable because you have to pay the...
Yes.
Yeah. What's the Coleraine Library?
That's a refurbishment of the existing premises, the Coleraine Library.
So it would no longer be as inescapable, and neither would Radio Fáilte.
Radio Fáilte I'm not so sure about. I think it may already be in progress, but I'd have to check on that.
Already be
in progress, but I'd have to check on that one. Coleraine hasn't started because there've been...
How can it have started if you haven't got the money to do it?
No, there may have been some development work this year. I'm not sure.
There was some money set aside, I think, at one point, or looked for to do some plans or concept or design work, whatever. But it's a bit difficult, though, I think, now for the committee to look at these figures when we've been given a paper today that has categories that are no longer accurate.
Well, I think that the problem from our point of view was that we wanted to consult with you as soon as possible. So the budget round hasn't been actually formally commissioned yet, so we're supplying you with material we've supplied to DFP in the recent past, giving rough cuts of our capital requirement for next year. So the problem is that if we do consult with you quickly before the round is formally commissioned, the advantage is you're aware of things. The disadvantage is that some of the information may be in progress, some of the work is still in progress.
Well,
so,
when were you given the new definition of inescapable?
Well, we'll be providing DFP with
this, and then they've been coming back to say
it was about a week or so ago, Chair,
Right.
that issued from DFP.
And if that's been around for a week, I have to say it would have been helpful for us to have the revised and therefore accurate, or more accurate, version for today's meeting, because we go into recess. We're out of the process then for a number of weeks. This is all moving very quickly, as you've said. We're being given an opportunity to comment today, but it's on the basis of a paper that, as of a week ago, is out of date. I think that is problematic for us, because we don't know where these things, if it's been moved from inescapable, has it been moved to pre-committed, has it been moved to whatever the other categories are, high priority? We just don't know. Could I just ask also then, when we're talking there, when you go down to page 25 then, there's a section there on arts, which is about health and safety and statutory and technical obligations. So we're going to refurbish the offices of NI Screen, Northern Ireland Screen Office, and all of that. Refurbishment of existing facilities to maintain high standards. £1 million there is going on. We don't know how much is health and safety, how much is statutory and technical, and how much is refurbs.
Sorry.
I was just going to say that what the function of that, of those categories of maintaining existing infrastructure, is that in our experience we need between £8 and £9 million a year just to keep things going through the ALBs and keep their assets up to date and usable. So I think that we're flagging there to DFP that that's what we need across those different business areas, and then beyond that we need money for new projects, but this is simply to maintain existing infrastructure. So for instance, the Arts Council may have a pot of money, capital money, to give out to various organisations, for example the MAC to do various things, or the Lyric or the Opera House. So it's to maintain the existing asset estate, if you like, in the arts sector. And that's the same is the case right through those different sectors. So we're saying to the DFP, we need money to keep going. And in addition to that, we'd also like, in some specific cases, more budget to do new things. I'm not sure if that helps.
Okay. Could I just ask then, in terms of the two other categories there, that was arts, in terms of museums, is funding there to manage health and safety issues and statutory technical refurbishment of existing facilities and public access requirements? Now, these are high priority. One of the things that strikes me, because I haven't seen it anywhere else here, £5.5 million down there on these are all rather strange. I have to see the way they're set. For example, let's take down there museums then, also Museum Malone Buildings, 5.5 million. What is that? Or 5.5 M? What is that?
We understand that there are various options being discussed for the development of Malone Buildings.
Right.
We understand that there are a number of options being discussed as to the future of Malone Buildings. That's an area opposite the Ulster Museum on the Stranmillis Road, which are present unused.
Oh, right, okay.
So there have been various options put forward to use those in some constructive way.
Right. And could I ask then, just in terms of arts, at the top of page 26, has there Seamus Heaney, the McCracken, I assume that's McCracken Cultural Society on the Elton Road, a National Gallery, and Lissanelli GA.
That's a shared
What is CLG? Sorry, CLG's the GA. I thought it was the one that was Irish version of what the GA stands
I
for.
think this is a shared education campus.
Is this CLG? But what, isn't there a thing called CLG or something, GA? Or?
CLG, Common Low Class Scale.
CLG, that's right. I misread it. Sorry.
No, it's
right,
not that.
this is a learning centre for the arts. Right, got that one right. Then languages is what? Aras na Fall. I presume that's Falls Road. Something or other house. What is it?
And that's part of a social investment fund project on Falls Way and Broadway.
On Falls Road and Causeway and Broadway.
It's to do with a building in the Gaeltacht quarter.
Yeah, that's an idea that's been around for quite a number of years, but yeah, okay. And then in a project there in 138,000 for something in Twinbrook. That's
That's a
what is that?
Twinbrook Family Centre. DSD is leading in that project, and that represents our contribution towards it.
Right. And the community-based language facilities, where are they?
That's a much broader, again, a marker bid, a much broader project on languages. We can supply you with more detail on that later on, but we haven't any with us today.
How soon could you supply that?
Well, we could have it with you. It should be available within a week, Chair. What I would say is that you're aware of Ian May's appointment to the department and the setting up of the Capital Portfolio Division. This goes back to perhaps the points that Mr. Creed was making in terms of strategic planning, and the intention is that there will be a more strategic look taken at our capital requirements going forward, particularly in the context of moving into the new departments. And these markers are down as indications of the amounts of money that could be required under that strategic programme.
So of the 500,000 there then for languages, community-based language facilities, how much of that would be devoted to each of the two minority languages?
Do we have that information? Or
We don't. We need to come back to that. That's within.
And then also there was, sorry, there's another reference. Yes, languages there. Refurbishment of existing facilities. This is on page 25. Yeah, sorry. Oh, it's R25. Sorry, it's. Find it here. Maintaining existing infrastructure provision. There's a section there, languages, refurbishment of existing facilities to maintain service levels, public access requirements, 1,150,000. What existing facilities are those?
Again, we'll have to come back to that, Chair. We're simply talking here about just very broad brush amounts, no specifics at this point, but we will come back to that.
It just occurs to me there, two things about this. In terms of existing facilities, the only existing facility that would relate to the Ulster Scots would be the Ulster Scots Agency building there, Corn Market, or Corn Exchange.
Corn Exchange at Magus, yes.
Which does not require refurbishment because it's a rented building, as I understand it. So if it's existing facilities, presumably the 1.15 is all going towards Irish language projects.
I can't confirm that today, Chair. We'll have to come back to you on that one.
I think that probably is the answer because there wouldn't be anything to spend it on. There's no existing facilities.
There is some ongoing refurbishment work at the Ulster Scots Centre.
Still, even though it's finished. Right.
It's not major, but there is some work going on. But we'll have to come back to you on this.
And are those existing facilities for languages then, could you indicate which ones are owned by the community as opposed to being a rented building such as the Exchange? Because it seems to me that what we're ending up with is in one language sector it is a government rented building that other people are then having to pay the fee for the rental every year. That's drawn out, whereas in the other case capital money is going up front, you own the building. And I know that the one at the corner of Broadway and the Falls Road, the idea was to put Irish language organisations in there. It was said to me by people involved in it that rather than putting money into the pocket of a developer who develops a building in the centre of Belfast, it's better if it recycles into the community, and therefore it makes the community sector more sustainable.
Yes.
Which is very different from the way that it's been done with the Ulster Scots Agency building. So I'd be interested in, is there an equality, has any equality thought been given EQIA to the approach to capital investments and refurbishment. Seems to me one is you're creating a strong community-owned, community-based infrastructure worth millions of pounds, and the other people are paying rent, something else.
Yes.
So yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor McCrae.
So, tell me about this DSD leading, and our contribution is Daisyfield. What was that? That was about Daisyfield, was it?
No, it was about Twinbrook, I think.
Twinbrook, yes, sorry,
Twinbrook
Twinbrook.
Family Centre.
Yes. So, how much are DSD putting into it?
DST putting in 200,000. OFM, DFM through the Social Investment Fund is putting in almost 800,000.
And what are we putting in?
137,500. 137,000.
So, how do we manage these issues? You know, because why do we feel that we need to put some money into that?
Well, because it's designed to be a hub for a range of services, including arts and cultural projects. It will also include family support services and community education, but our interest obviously is in the arts and cultural element.
I just think that I'm interested about how we deal with cocktail funding, because we can never keep an eye on anything. So if you had to mention that in response to the chair, I would not have known that OFM, DFM were putting in 800,000 into this. So how do we manage this process so that we know what funding is available?
Well, I think that goes back possibly to the capital portfolio office and to the programme that they come up with, and the degree to which there are elements which are partnership projects within that programme, and making that visible to the committee.
So how are we going to do that?
Well, I think I'm not sure of the detail, but it certainly is an issue that we'll bring back to Ian May and to the Capital Portfolio Office in taking this forward. But I don't see any difficulty there. It's just a matter of presenting you with the information that you need.
Okay. So the question is, do you think, given that there's quite a lot of health and safety requirements on museums, libraries and such like, do you think it's time that we actually stopped, I think as Mr. Cree was saying, you know, sort of dancing around the edge here, and is it time we sort of closed the museum?
Well, that may be something that we do need to consider in the context of the CSR next year.
Do you have any idea which museum we should close?
Well, I wouldn't like to put forward a suggestion. Certainly, there needs to be an analysis, but you know, it needs to be done in the context of what other options there might be to deliver museums offering on a sustainable footing.
But that's why I'm asking these questions. I mean, I'm just picking a number of ones that you've picked up here. I see. I want to come back to the Malone Buildings bit to do with museums. That looks like a refurbishment or some sort of health and safety issue in the documents. Isn't that correct?
In relation to?
Well, somebody mentioned, just as I was listening there, that the Malone Buildings opposite the Ulster Museum is actually buildings that are currently not being utilised, and we want to bring them on stream. But actually, although they're put down as health and it is a refurbishment of a building, it is actually adding additional capacity rather than what you might consider to be health and safety issues of an existing facility. Would that be correct? Do you not think it's... I'm not saying that you were trying to mislead in any way, but do you not think that's a different proposition to somebody? Because we see loads and loads of health and safety related bids coming through from museums, and you sort of think it's because people are going to wander around and the stairs are not going to be properly protected, or there's going to be electricity. You know, it's not a new...
I think you may be misreading, or the table isn't clear enough. We've described that Ulster, the Malone Buildings project under new projects. This isn't part of an existing provision.
Yes, it is, but it's new. It's new projects, but we're trying to work out, if you're telling me that we have to make cuts, I mean, your synopsis at the top, Annex 1, was 5% major scaling back or cessation of school and community. I mean, it's quite draconian what you've put out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the challenge, of course, comes back is to say, well, make some decisions. You know, you can't have everything. What do you want? But I'm having some difficulty working out what is really inescapable, what is really health and safety, what is really a strategic way forward. If I just give you an example, and obviously I'm looking for information, I'm putting you over a bar on this, but waterways. There is a requirement from the needs analysis for an expenditure of 2.5 million. To do what exactly?
Well, they have an asset management plan which identifies exactly what it is needed to be done. But there is a lot of backlog maintenance on the water service or the waterways infrastructure, and that's to address some of that.
But it is quite scary, though, the way that you've written it. That the risk analysis calls for an immediate expenditure of £2.5 million. But actually, you've only put in 1.5 million as your capital, your desired capital. So, like, how serious is it? Is it if we don't spend either the 1.5 or the 2.5 million? Say we decide to spend it on museums. What's the impact? What actually happens?
I understand the question. I think those sorts of issues are being considered in drawing out or fine-tuning the capital programme. I think that is an anomaly which does need to be resolved as part of that process to give a better picture of how we should prioritise the bids going forward.
Do you know what, David, and I mean this gently, because Aidan Cassidy had a great Yes Minister response, but that's also just right up there. Yes, that is an anomaly that needs to be addressed and go. We have to make, what's really shocking about this information is that I'm reading here that a decision will be made by Christmas.
Yes, and now, to be clear, the 5 and the 10% reductions apply just to resource. The capital is being looked at on a zero-based basis, and we're being asked for bids for capital. There's no indication that overall we're likely to be looking at an overall level of cuts around that level.
Sorry, there is or there isn't?
Not for capital.
Okay, but part of the reason why you do capital is to reduce resource expenditure sometimes?
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
So the two are linked? The
two definitely are, yeah.
But if I came to this point, this is shocking. I don't know if anybody ever listens to this committee or looks in this, but when someone comes along and gives me a draconian 5 or 10% budget planning and says the decision is planned to be made before Christmas.
Yes.
Now, in Assembly terms, that means we've 1 week.
Unfortunately, we can't. We are unable to alter those timescales. We're trying to deliver a budget within that, within that envelope. We would like to be able to have more time, but that's not available to us.
But, and I just want to, sorry, Chair, just one last thing. I just want to make this point. I'm not having in any way a go at you as a department. I will simply say to you, the arts community think that they've had a rally, that they've had money from monitoring round, that arts is now being saved, that things are going forward, that there's a progression in here. People say, let's recognise the value because of all of the great things that they do for community engagement. And you then tell us, actually, 1 week from now, it's either 5 or 10%, and it's going to have huge impact on community engagement programmes. This will come as a huge shock to the arts community. And it'll also come to a shock to either Libraries NI, who are going to have to close libraries. I mean, it's not round there. They're going to have to close libraries, or we're going to have to close museums. And I don't think that we have the information out there for people to take part in the negotiations that you're suggesting that we've got a short period of time to do.
Thank you.
We're just getting nodding there from that chair. I'd just like to hear if that is the position.
Yeah, well, what we are keen to do today is to see to what extent, based on the information, and I accept your it's not as detailed as we would like to provide it at this stage. It is a first cut, but based on that, to get the committee's view as to what areas they would like to see, the committee would like to see protected in the context of reductions of that sort of level overall.
That's the reductions are in revenue.
On revenue, yes.
But what we also, I think, may want to comment on, or some people want to comment on either in here or outside, is the allocation of monies in terms of capital as opposed to revenue.
Yes.
Has there been a bid in here for the restoration of the 2 vessels that have been sitting for 40 years in the Folk and Transport Museum that need to be restored?
I haven't been able...
We don't know. It's possible that the £1 million or so, which is allocated towards museums for managing ongoing capital expenditure, could deliver those. It depends on the costs involved. The answer is at this stage we don't know.
Most of them have been sitting there 40 years, another 40 years, not matter too much. Could you just also ask, was there any money? Well, you could also, when you're looking into that, you could also ask the restoration of the McKinley Presidential Home, which is up in Omagh Folk Park, has been there for some years. Could that now actually, there's not many countries in the world that do have presidential ancestral homesteads. It is only the President of the America we're talking about. It's not some people's scale of things that may not be terribly important, but for others, they would see, if they understand culture, probably they would understand the potential that there is in having the building restored and reconstructed. And we're not talking of the scale of money that's been spent on some other things here, but it would be part of our cultural heritage. So those are 3 things: those 2 vessels and the McKinley home. And Gordon Dunn next.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much, gentlemen, for coming in again. In relation to Radio Fulcha, 403,000 is inescapable. How is that? How do you justify that?
Changed, apparently.
It's not right.
It's justified because it's a binding ministerial commitment. The EFP don't accept that as inescapable. Their view of inescapable is contractually committed. So there are 2 views on this.
Yeah, but whose view prevails?
Well, from the point of view of bids into 16-17 exercise, it's DFP's view.
So that's the one you'll be working to from now on?
Pardon?
That's the one you'll be working to from now on?
Yes.
Have a say.
For the purposes of this exercise, yes.
Yeah.
If we describe a bid as inescapable or pressure as inescapable to the EFP, we use their definition.
Yeah. So, from your point of view, Gordon, Radio Fulcha is not inescapable anymore.
It's not. It's optional then.
Inescapable though because it's started. That was the point.
Is that the point?
Oh.
Well, there has been some development work. I'm not sure.
Sorry, but has construction work started?
I'm not sure if there's a
No,
contract.
There's been no construction work.
I don't think so.
But the point, Chair, you highlighted was some people will try and start projects and then say that is now
Inescapable, yeah. But my understanding is, has a contract been awarded? The builder?
I don't believe a contract has been awarded. But
Contract hasn't been awarded. Construction work hasn't started. Pretty clear why DFP says it's inescapable.
not inescapable.
Chair, it's in accordance with our guidelines. And
Sorry, it's an inescapable, yeah. Okay, go on.
Where is it actually? Where is the building? Where is it located?
It's West Belfast somewhere.
Okay, I'll get it.
It's in the
Are you familiar?
No, it's not. It's not.
It's
It's
in
waste ground down beside the West Link.
well, there wasn't it?
It's just at the corner of the West Link. It used to be in Coulterland.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But the site is at the
Sounds-
corner of the West Link.
Sounds a very inclusive location.
Right,
Right.
Gordon, just ask questions.
Anderson's Town Leisure Centre.
Centre.
Anderson's Town Leisure Centre, we've pre-committed 2.75 million. I understand it's under the control of the rates-rich Belfast City Council.
Yes.
Why are we committing 2.75 million to it?
Whenever the stadiums programme was established, there was a feeling that the areas around stadiums should be improved as well as regards sporting facilities. So at Ravenhill you have the Aquinas Centre, which is close by, which received money from DCAL for improvement. With Windsor, we're also part funding with the City Council redevelopment of Olympia. And so with Casement, we're also contributing with the City Council towards the redevelopment of Andersonstown Leisure Centre.
So it's part of the, is it part
of the general programme.
Of the Casement Park project, is it part of that?
Yes, it's linked to that.
It's linked to
In
it?
the same way that Windsor is linked to Olympia, or Olympia is linked to Windsor, and Aquinas is linked to Ravenhill, or Kingspan.
And is that the total commitment towards it, this part of the project?
Let me just check.
I believe so. I believe it is.
Or is this just an initial
No, it's.
costing?
I think this is that 2.75 is the total.
Okay, so is that planned to proceed as part of the overall development of Casement?
It's an associated project and will deliver benefits to the community.
Okay. Thank you. I suppose this point has already been made, but high priority, again, could you just clarify how you define high priority and who actually makes the decision of high priority? Talks here about high priority projects fall into two broad categories: maintaining existing provision and new projects.
As Michael said, we have spent year on year around 5 million on maintaining our existing facilities, on things like meeting health and safety requirements and so on. So those are initial amounts which are set against that need in the with the capital, with setting up with the capital portfolio division. We will be taking a more strategic look at that area in the future, because up to now we have been responding to need on an annual basis, and there has been probably insufficient planning applied to it. So this is an attempt to adopt a more strategic approach to that. So that is the first element there, and then the second element is in relation to new projects, which have been identified at this stage.
Right. In languages, under languages there we have 1.15 million. Where is that money being allocated in relation to refurbishment of existing facilities?
I think we've already agreed to come back to you on that one, on an analysis of that.
Okay. We don't know anything more on it?
No, we're going to get that.
Okay. In relation to sports, we're talking about finally giving some money to motorsport in relation to health and safety requirements. Have you any details on that at all?
No, but we can provide those as well if you wish.
Right, thank you. Moving on. Yes, Northwest, that place that gets eternal funding. Ready for the Foil, 2 million. What's all that about? Just part of the...
That's a DHSS PS programme and relates
DHSS?
yes,
What were you doing?
Sorry, apologies.
and relates to the bridges, some work to be done with the Foyle bridges. And I think it's in connection with the trying to stop suicides and so on, that where people use the bridges. And it involves really changing the look of the bridges, making them how should I? There's proposals to make them to not make them as it is easy for people to use them as a means of undertaking suicide attempts.
Okay.
Sorry, that was a bit long-winded.
Yeah, no, I understand it. But is this part of the does it sit under the year of culture funding? Is this a stretch of it?
No, I think this is separate from that.
Right, and is this 2 million then?
Is that the total cost of that project?
As I understand it, it's a contribution,
Right. So,
and it's an estimate. It's a rough estimate.
So it's, Department of Health is driving it?
Yes,
We're putting 2 million into it?
okay,
potentially.
we're going to have to, if you, a few other things you can think of, maybe, but maybe go over to Rosie for a moment here, because it's now 11:45 and we're quite a bit to go.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks, gentlemen.
Okay, Cormac Harley, I'll just be brief because I think a lot of it has been covered. Do you see the way it was brought up about inescapable funding and the radio fellowship? So you were saying then the EFP has a different
Yes.
description?
Our Minister considers that when she makes a binding commitment towards something, that project then becomes inescapable. DFP's definition is narrower and talks about contractual or statutory commitment.
Okay, so what actually does that mean then for the project?
Well, the project still has ministerial backing, and there's a sound argument for continuing with it, but it isn't contractually committed.
What would it take to be contractually?
Well, a contract signed with a developer to go and build it or do whatever refurbishment work's necessary,
Okay,
and that we understand hasn't happened yet.
okay, all right.
And couldn't happen until you get the money for it. Next one's William Humphrey.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Maintaining existing infrastructure. Can I ask, can you tell us which facilities are receiving funding? There's funding listed there. Which facilities are receiving that funding? £1 million. Disability access and tailored facilities for disabled sports.
This is under the sports category, £1 million.
Yes, it's under maintaining existing infrastructure provision, stroke Department of Communities.
Yes. Yes, we've already agreed we'll provide an analysis of that £1 million.
You will? Okay. Can I then ask, in terms of the listed under desirable projects, again, could have a breakdown there of the, or a copy that would be useful of the two strategies, participation strategy and the facility strategies, please? Take it you don't have those, but I'd be keen to see copies of those. Can I then...
We know that the participation strategy has to do with introducing more women and disabled people to sport, but we have more detail than that with us today.
Yeah, both of those, copies of both of those strategies would be useful. Can I then turn, I know my colleague raised the issue of the funding to the GAA, which I think is £6 or £7 million. Can I ask, in relation to the Casement Park project and the appointment of Mr Skelly, who was your programme director at DCAL, who's now moved to be the project director at the stadium, one of the recommendations coming out of the Power report, is that correct? The Power report which your department endorsed. What does it mean that your department endorsed the Power report?
I think those are questions that probably should be asked of other people in the department, but I don't think that was one of the recommendations that the director should move across to the GAA.
No, but was it? I think it was a recommendation that there should be a project director appointed, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll come on to the appointment of the individual, but I do think that was one of the recommendations from the Power report, which, as I've said, your department has endorsed. In relation to Mr Muskelly's position, is Mr Muskelly now moved from being a civil servant in your department to being an employee of the GAA?
No, Mr Muskelly was never employed by our department. He was brought in from SIB.
Okay.
And as I understand it now, and I'm not the person that you would need to ask these questions to, but as I understand it, he is still with SIB, but has moved across now to...
Okay. So who was paying him when he was at DCAL?
We were meeting his costs.
Right. Who's now meeting his costs now is at the GAA?
I assume it's the GAA. It's not DCAL.
Right. So it is the GAA.
I
It's
assume
not
the
coming
GAA.
out of this new money that the minister got recently.
No.
Right, so it's definitely, Mr Muskelly's salary is being paid by the GA.
If it's different, they'll come back and
Yes,
confirm that.
if it's different, we'll come back and
They're
confirm.
telling us that it is paid for by the GA. If it's not, they'll come back when they go home and
Okay.
the department check it.
Can I ask then, was Mr Muskelly seconded to work with Ulster Rugby, the Irish Football Association,
What is-
in the development of
Is
those
this,
two
is this about this budget?
Yes, it is. Because there are monies that are committed that have absolutely no detail to them.
Okay, which one are we talking about?
The ones that I raised earlier.
Which page are we on?
Well, I'm talking now about page 27.
27, right, okay. 27. Sports, right.
Okay?
Okay, we're on page 27, the sports section?
Only enough, yes.
Okay, that's good.
So, was there someone seconded from? I'm basically trying to get to the hub of the issue here. A report comes. Your programme director is shifted across to the GA. That didn't happen with the IFN. It didn't happen with Ulster Rugby for those two stadiums. Why not?
Well, to say, I think we're not the best people to ask those questions to, but Rory Muskelly was employed by Ulster Rugby to do work for them. And when he left them, he went to SIB, and it was sometime after his, when he was at SIB, that he came into DCAL to undertake the role within DCAL. And now he's moved to the GAA. That's as far as I know the trajectory.
That's fine. But we could get clarity on those other points. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. Just a final question is there on page, sorry, it's in the section.
To check, could that be a penultimate question? I'd like to ask a very quick final.
Oh, yeah, okay. Right. Priority new projects, then it has in here total for sports. There's £1 million for boxing. Is that a programme, or is that for particular projects within boxing?
It's to cover established need for facilities at boxing clubs which can't be covered by the budget available through the current boxing investment programme. So it's a top-up.
And is that boxing programme open to clubs that are not members of the IABA?
I don't know. I'll have to check that one.
And what is happening in Ardoyne in sport? 168,000. What's that? What
It's
is
the
it?
Ardoyne Youth Club.
Ardoyne Youth Club.
Yes, the information we have on that one is that during the 13-14 financial year, funding was made available to help organisations where a direct approach was made to the department, citing a financial pressure to help meet an urgent sporting need. It was felt that their case for funding was compelling, but they haven't been able to use that money yet for various reasons. So there's a proposal to award them funding in 16-17.
I thought that the department had picked up on this issue of the desire for funding to be done in an open, transparent way. A way in which everybody can apply and know they can apply, and that this programme is rather than people just, there's a funding programme from Sport NI. If you don't get it, that doesn't really matter, because you can always run straight to the department and get the money. And the 168,000 was for Ardoyne Youth Club.
Mm-hmm.
And what sporting facilities do they require if it's a youth club? And can any youth club get these?
The answer, I don't know the answer to the first question or the second question.
And this is the problem. You have more information in front of you than we have. And we're still, and still can't answer the questions. And no disrespect to you for that. I'm not saying that in an awkward way. I'm simply saying it's very, very difficult when you get a generic term here like it says sport in Ardoyne, 168,000. We now know if you'd put down there Ardoyne Youth Club, that would have been helpful. But even if it was Ardoyne Youth Club, we still don't know what it's for. And why not every other youth club? Every youth club could say, well, we want a boxing club or we want a gym. This is so ad hoc. Make it up as you go along. And the fact is, we're being asked to endorse something or sign off or submit to something, agree, concede to something.
No, Chair, we're asking for your comments and representation.
But it's hard to it's hard to hit a moving target. It keeps changing. It's hard to hit a target that's not even there because there's no information. Do you appreciate our point?
In fairness, Chair, it might be that we're a bit constrained with time. I actually think that the contribution's been quite interesting.
I'm not disagreeing.
I know that's the case, yes.
Not disagreeing with that at all. Yes, that's fine. I'm simply making the point, and you know, we've made it before in previous occasions, previous rounds. It's been made again and again. It's been relayed to the Permanent Secretary. We need information, we need detail to be able to comment. Leslie Cray.
Yeah, very quickly, Chair. Michael mentioned maintenance and the importance of that in the budget, and also refurbishment. And of course, there's a big grey area between those two. But this year, the department carried forward 1.9 million from memory for maintenance from the previous year. It was paid, I think, during the current year. That's despite the fact that overall, the Minister was returning 24.4 million ring-fenced for depreciation and impairments. How can that happen? I'm not asking for a quick answer if you want to consider that, but there's something wrong with the system.
Well, there are budget rules which we have to comply with. Some funding, executive funding, for instance, is ring-fenced, and if we can't use it for that purpose, it has to go back. Other general funding we can use.
Yeah, but my point was you were paying out 1.9 million for the previous financial year and the current year for depreciation. It's in the budget. At the same time, the Minister for Finance is returning 24.4 ring-fenced for depreciation and impairments. That's going back to the Treasury. Why couldn't it be taken out of that? That's my point.
I'm not familiar enough with the details.
Let me have a look at that, because I have a concern about this whole area of not just this department, but a whole lot of departments where this thing, which is a fair expense, and trotted through at the same time, starting to return money to trade.
Well, I'm sure you do appreciate that in that sort of funding, there isn't any cash implication.
No.
So with depreciation or impairment, that simply means that the book value of something has dropped further than you thought it might have.
Yes, but that 1.9 million may now, and that's what I'm asking you, if we would look at it, may well be taken out of conventional capital. And that share of that could possibly have been put somewhere else. And take it out of the ring-fence money.
I'm not sure of the detail, but in principle...
Could you have a look at it?
Yes.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks indeed for your presentation this morning. And
can't shoot the messenger.
We'll just... Yeah, we've decommissioned. We'll come back to you again. It is very difficult to make a full, proper response with what we have.
Well, as we said, this is a first cut. DFP will invite formally bids for capital, and at that point we'll have a much more refined product, and that will be shared with you, of course.
Has the Minister included the funding for musical instruments for bands?
That's inside the 1 million or so for the arts sector. Because as you know, she is keen to continue or to restart funding there as soon as possible.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So that money's, but that's for next year. There's no money for this year.
No, this is 16-17.
But is it? Yes, but there will be no money that allocated to that in 15-16.
Not aware of any plans, sir.
That's fine. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, William.
Chair, we've spent 2 hours as a committee doing what is our job. I find that extremely frustrating, I have to say. I am really, and I know we put a huge amount of work on the clerk and his team in terms of letters having to be sent. That's an example of why letters are to be sent. Now, I am sick, sore and tired coming to this committee and receiving evasive answers or no answers. And, Michael said that was the first cut. Well, that's fine. I want them back. I got little or no time to ask questions. I had more questions to ask around issues. And to put down headings of sports and £3 million beside them, and you're supposed to know what that is, that's not good enough. I want to know, we're going to get documentation and whatever back. We would be feeling in our duty as a committee of scrutiny not to pursue this. There's very clearly issues there in terms of distribution of monies, geographically and so on, that need to be reassessed. But for example, £3 million on £1 million on a participation strategy, £2 million on facility strategy, and nowhere does it list where these facilities are, and so on. I don't know how you're expected to scrutinise this, but this department continually gives scant documentation for this committee to try and scrutinise, deliberately being evasive and withholding information. I am really, really frustrated about it. And we have made this point to the permanent secretary of this department on a number of occasions when he's been in front of the committee. So I would propose that they're brought back as early as possible when we return in the new year.
Mr. Owen?
I just would be, I don't want to be associated with that last remark when it was said that they're being evasive and deliberately holding back because information, because we don't have the information that is the case. And I think that's dangerous language to be using, unless we do know, and if there is something being held back, then we know that. But to say it's deliberate hold back information, I think is a bit dangerous.
Well, if information is not there, there's two explanations. It's either deliberate or it's incompetence, one or the other.
I don't agree with that, Chair. I think
there is no third option.
The gentleman said it was...
Chair, one example is, I asked about the participation strategy, which has 2 words to it. And they started to tell us about this participation strategy. Why did they not put that in the report? That's being evasive.
I think there is a letter that needs to go to the permanent secretary. I have spoken to him in the past to try and get the point across, but it seems it's not filtering through somewhere in the department, or it's getting a blockage somewhere in the department, that we require detailed information. To simply say, and I'm just picking this example because it was so vague, say sport Ardoyne. Is that upper Ardoyne, lower Ardoyne? Is it boxing? Is it a gym? Is it a football pitch? What is it?
That's all I want to know.
It could be simple information like that. It's 1 word, 2 words.
I think we should wrap this department up.
What are doing?
That's not something that is within our remit, but I think it's obviously happened. Okay, well, can we agree to send a letter asking for, or sorry, you want to make a proposal, William?
I do. I think they should be brought back when they have more information. Like, we're going away. A number of members asked them to go away and provide information. They wouldn't have to do that if they actually provided the information when they were here.
And the point again being that we're about to go into recess. It's therefore, what's our first meeting in January?
7th.
7th of January is the first time we'll get them back.
Permanent Secretary scheduled for the 14th of January.
Permanent Secretary scheduled for the 14th of January, but of course we were told that decisions were being made on some things before Christmas.
Right.
So we're about 3 weeks too late. So the letter goes to the Permanent Secretary, William, making which, be precise, but just to bring them back.
Well, I think that I want to see those guys back.
Okay.
So more detail. Answer questions in the detail that they were asked and weren't able to provide. And, that is not a commentary on those individuals. I don't know.
What's to do with them?
Whether they're not being provided with information. But clearly, if you can't put down an expenditure of £2 million and use a generic term like sports strategy and expect people not to ask questions.
We'll agree then that we ask for them to be brought back in January for further explanation.
With more detail.
All those in favour? Indicate, please.
That's agreement.
Oh, it's our agreement, right.
Can we just say, though, you made the point that this is almost 3 weeks too late. How are we going to find out the decision on the 5% or 10% cut? How do we know what that decision's expected before Christmas?
Being the draft budget.
Yeah, but how do we get? So when does it come in front of
In the
us?
new year.
It's an executive meeting, I think, this afternoon, I'm assuming, but beyond that, I don't know whether it's going to be made today or whether it'll be made at another meeting.
Well, I just think that. I mean, I was supportive of William's position, and I will just say for the record, I thought the gentlemen were very open and helpful. I thought it was the constraints were not of their making.
That's
so
correct.
So, if any position, I wouldn't want any
No.
on their contribution. I thought it was really good. In fact, however, the point is, when you read what's in this these annexes about the draconian effect on the arts, I just wonder if we need to do something. You could be looking at the middle of January before you would get anybody to come back. At which stage it's too late.
And it may be that
That's the strategy.
that is, as William suggests.
Well, what could we do? When would if there is an executive meeting, that a decision will be made on the 5% or the 10%? Because the way they always do these things is they say look for 5 and do 10, and then or look for 5 and 10, and you get, well, you've got 5, but it could have been worse. It could have been 10%. I would be pretty sure there's a 5% cut coming down the line on this. Now, the arts sector will be just aghast because they thought they've won their battle. They thought that they've actually had their rally and done whatever. So we need to do something in the time when we can still fix this.
Could I take that and mark that as an issue first? And just also ask a question. My understanding is that when budgets are drawn up, there's an EQIA done on them. Is that correct?
Chair, I'd have to look into that. I'm not entirely sure.
This time.
Huh?
I don't think it'll happen this time, Chairman, but I would remind you that these gentlemen said that they were looking for our sort of views on the priorities.
How do you?
You couldn't do it with information available.
I think maybe we do need to make the point to them that at this point it's impossible to comment on the priorities because we don't have enough information.
Need the detail.
But it is absolutely possible that you should comment on and express concern.
On particular aspects of it.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, to ask us to have a comment on out-of-date information scares me, actually.
Yeah.
It
changed.
You're beginning to look at this and say, what am I missing? Where, have we missed a sentence in here that's going to make awful changes within the arts? And that scares me. So just that language scares me, that, they had the executive, if they're looking at this in the afternoon, have totally different information. Or extended information that we weren't privy to. So I'd be very cautious on making any comment today on it.
We could, I think, make the comment that we understand that a week ago that it was confirmed by DFP, even though it's been said by DFP a long time ago, what the meaning of inescapable is. And yet we were still presented with a paper which we've now been told is out of date and does not accord with DFP definition. Can that point be put into a letter?
But a letter's internal, and I'm thinking about this now, and the point that Ms McCarroll has just raised. I think, a number of people have expressed their frustration around this. I think the committee should make a statement publicly around that issue that would go out. If people can either vote for or again or whatever, but a statement expressing concern at the scantiness of the information that was provided, that was out of date, and we were asked to give comment on it. When we were giving comment on information that was out of date, and we had no up-to-date information, we were allowed to make and evaluate information that would in fact be accurate.
If William wouldn't mind, I don't think it needs to be quite as draconian as that, though obviously he can argue his case. But I do think it is unreasonable to expect us to make commentary, to provide advice on information that we don't have, and that the effects are going to be really serious. I think I would support him in doing that. I'm just a wee bit worried, William, about I don't want to have a go at officials that were only doing their best.
No, I'm not. Anything I'm saying is not relating to these two gentlemen.
You're after saying they deliberately held back information.
No, the
I was talking
department.
about the department, Chair.
You're
If people would
talking
listen, I was
about
talking about the department. And very clearly the department are, and they are sent in here as representatives, senior representatives of the department. So, I mean, if in the fact that we don't have the permanent secretary or the deputy permanent secretary, then I'm sorry, those people will take the frustration of members. But the point I'm making is, you know, information is being withheld. You can't make an educated comment on information you don't have. And if you fail to make comment, then the press will attack us for not doing our job.
Just to clarify William's point there, he's absolutely right. Paper before it comes here. Paper before it comes here will have not been simply drawn up by those gentlemen.
Of course it won't.
That will have gone through the entire system of the department, right to the top, to the permanent secretary, and I suspect the minister or her special advisor will have gone through it as well. So it's in no way, as William says very clearly, and also Basil, it's not an attack in any way on the two officials who came here. They were simply the bearers of a message on behalf of the entire department. So if you want to put forward a proposal, William.
And if we can marry the two between Mr McRae, I don't want to be seen to be draconian at coming up to the time of...
No, and I realise that.
Well, can we...
Basil's new word, we used it quite a lot today.
Yes. Can you form words for the core of what you're saying, then we'll get...
I just think the more
Basil's trained by the NIO, so let him...
I just think...
What's wrong with them?
I just think that the committee should note with regret that there was insufficient detail provided for us to provide meaningful commentary, and that we are extremely worried about the prospect of, I won't use the word draconian, but let's say that the prospect of cuts coming through, which will have grave implications for the sector that we're required to look after.
And that it is very difficult for us to comment on priorities without the detailed information that we require and we've asked for in the past.
Yeah.
Can I just, sorry, please, Chair, were we not told this is only the first tranche of it?
Yes, we were.
And the gentleman took away and said they'd come back with information.
Yeah.
Should we not give that a chance for that information to come back?
I think that's a fair point, except we were also told there will be decisions made before Christmas, so we'll not have an opportunity. So if we don't do it now and make comment on this now, decisions will be made and we will be seen to have been acquiescing in those decisions.
Okay, it's been proposed there by William. Seconder is Basil. Okay. All those in favour of writing in those terms, please indicate. 1,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Chair 7.
Okay, all those against?
2.
2. Thank you.
Abstentions. So what is it, the press release?
So we're writing and a press release, I'm
Yeah.
assuming, but do both. Yeah.
Chair, but I put this, if we're writing this letter, I take it then we'll not read it in the Telegraph.
No, we're writing and issuing a statement both.
Aye, but we'll not be reading about this in your column in the paper. Because you would need to be declaring an interest, which you haven't done.
Declaring of what interest?
Well, you take everything out of this committee, nearly everything out of this committee to your programme in the paper. And if you're taking what came out of this meeting today to be put into your paper.
I think what's come out of the committee today has probably been broadcast already on the internet, so therefore it's not news to anybody.
You know,
Yeah.
you need to
So we'll move on. Thank you.
You haven't declared an interest. As chair of this committee, you should be declaring that interest.
Just to be clear, the resolution that we have just passed is a letter and a press statement. This is an official committee position on this. It is going out, it will be public, and actually, in this instance, the chair is mandated to speak on behalf of the committee for what's just been agreed.
The letter would go with the name of the chair on it, and then the chair is mandated, as been pointed out there, to, if you're asked for a comment, you can comment on it in that capacity, because it was committee decision.
Correct.
Press release and a letter to the permanent secretary.
Just clarify.
Yeah. Could I just also ask, that we write to the decal arm's length bodies to seek their views of the challenges that they face under the transfer of functions.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you.
Could you just, if you're writing to them, you should also mention the 5 and 10%?
Sure, I think they've already been approved.
They've been approached apparently in that. Well, could we ask them if they want to forward any comments that they're making to the department? Could
This
they
is
forward us
ready.
as well?
Yep.
Right. Brings us on then to next major issue, which is the Fisheries Bill. And could I refer you to page 36 in the pack, part 0.41, the Clerk's memo, page 38, 0.42, the Fisheries Bill. 0.43 is at page 53, explanatory of financial memorandum. 0.44, a list of pre-legislative consultation respondents at page 65. 0.45, Fisheries Bill clause table showing the decal clauses and their EFM explanation is at page 67. And 0.46, Decal Minister's response regarding the Fisheries Bill being introduced is at page 6 of the table pack. This suggests that not to proceed with the bill might risk non-compliance with EU obligations around the protection and free passage of eels in inland waterways. And 0.47, draft of the outgoing letter that will be issued to councils as part of the call for evidence regarding the bill is at page 9 of the table pack. And we're about to get some officials now to...
Officials in, please.
Gillian?
Chair, is the work that has to go into this fisheries bill, will it be done in time before the end of our mandate, or what's your opinion?
That's something that we're going to have to right now, because that is a concern that a lot of people have, including the DARD committee itself.
Okay.
They haven't actually accepted the bill yet. They're still concerned about the timing. If it had been brought 6 months ago, it would have been a very different position. And we have with us Seamus Connor, who's the Chief Fisheries Officer in Decal. We have Liam Devlin, who's the Inland Fisheries Group in Decal, and John Terrington, the Fisheries Bill team in DARD. So if you're very welcome to the committee if you want to make your opening statement.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. I want the opportunity to update the committee on the finalised amendments to the inland fishery provisions within the Fisheries Act, which are included in the new draft Fisheries Bill. We would also like to extend our word of thanks to our DARD colleagues for all their assistance in facilitating our requirements as part of this process. These new provisions have been widely consulted on and largely reflect the views of key stakeholders. It is our belief that the inland fisheries provisions will help to modernise enforcement activity and to realign the 66 Fisheries Act with its obligations under EU directives, such as the Water Framework Directive and the EU Services Directive. The overall aim is to ensure that the powers under the 66 Act remain fit for purpose and that Decal has the flexibility to respond to evolving fishery management practice and its EU obligations. Liam Devlin is responsible for the processing of the IFG legislative programme, and I invite him to take the committee through the detail of the finalised clauses.
Thanks, Seamus. In developing the finalised inland fishery clauses, which now form part of the draft Fisheries Bill before you, Decal policy focused on 3 key areas. Firstly, fixed penalties for minor fishing offences, and streamlining the fish dealers' licence applications, and the protection and free passage of fish. Proposals were widely consulted on between August and November last year, with over 1,800 individuals and organisations notified, as well as media advertisement. 57 written responses were received. The clauses in the Fisheries Bill were finalised, incorporating views raised during the consultation process. I will now go through each of the inland fishery clauses in order and provide further detail on the context and impact. Clause 10 of the Bill amends Section 114, subsection 1 of the 1966 Fisheries Act, which currently requires anyone applying for a fish dealer's licence to obtain Justice of the Peace approval to the application. Decal see no reason to retain this requirement. It does not apply to any other category of licence. Moreover, taking forward this amendment will help to ensure compliance with the EU Services Directive by removing a barrier for service providers to trade across borders and facilitate an uninterrupted online application system. Clause 11 amends Section 48 of the 66 Act by extending the restrictions on the removal of material from the bed of a river to now apply to lake beds as well. Anyone wishing to remove such material will have to seek authorisation from the Department before doing so. The purpose of this new power is to further protect spawning beds of fish regardless of where that habitat may be. Clause 12.3 amends Section 54 of the 66 Act to extend existing protections for salmon, trout and eels to now include lampreys as well. Current legislation places an onus on dam owners to provide and maintain fish passage in river dams for salmon, trout and eels. This will be widened to include lampreys, which also find difficulty in passing such barriers. Clause 12.4 amends Section 54, empowering the Department to remove dams which are a barrier to fish passage where an owner cannot be identified and where the construction of a fish passage is not considered feasible. The remaining subsections make consequential amendments allowing the Department to enter land for the purposes of dam removal if required. Clause 13 amends Section 59 of the 66 Act to require anyone taking water from a river to fit a grill of not more than 10 millimetres at the entrance and exit of watercourses to protect the entry of small fish into these watercourses. This requirement will only apply to new installations, and exemptions will be permitted where the Department is satisfied that sufficient arrangements will be made by means other than a 10 millimetre grill size. In bringing forward this new power, DECAL has considered advice from the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute on best practice in fisheries management. Clause 14 empowers DECAL to introduce fixed penalties for inland fishery offences. This will be done by means of subordinate legislation. Specific offences will be determined and set out in regulations, which would also detail the penalty level for these offences, the issuing authority, process for payment and the mechanism for reviewing the level of penalties. Essentially, if the penalty is paid on time within a specified number of days, the person would not be liable for conviction and any criminal proceedings would not be taken before the period specified on the notice is over. This will have the effect of decriminalising angling activities so that angling errors need not end up in the criminal justice system. This will free up invaluable resources to allow the Department to focus on the protection of wild fisheries, the management of commercial fishing activity and to extend its community outreach programmes. DECAL proposals have been subject to quality impact screening tests and are compatible with the Convention on Human Rights and to have no differential impact on Section 75 groups. The partial regulatory impact assessment that accompanied consultation on the proposals concluded there were no substantial financial implications from the policy proposals and that any minor costs were outweighed by the benefits. We appreciate the Committee's urgent consideration of this draft bill and are now happy to take members' questions.
Okay, could I ask, first of all, this obviously spreads across two departments and two committees. There's reference, and the first few questions I want to ask are pretty generic but in general because it's difficult for us to go straight into this and get our heads around all of the detail of it. But in general terms, it refers there to non-compliance with EU obligations. That's one of the points that seems to be made, that this is not passed, there would be non-compliance. Because there is a concern about the speed with which we're being asked to deal with this in a matter of weeks. And it's coming up to the end of the Assembly term. So, this issue about potential non-compliance, which particular clauses of the bill could lead to non-compliance?
I can say from a DARD point of view, a key clause is clause 6, which relates primarily to sea fisheries and the enforcement of sea fisheries legislation. EU legislation, the Common Fisheries Policy. We were aware that this is something that we needed to do and included it in the proposals for a bill as part of the review with our colleagues in DECAL.
It's only clause 6 that would lead to non-compliance.
That, in the short term, is the case. There are other things which we would be aware that further down the line, if we don't sort, and would need to be amended in both sides, both CAL and DARD items, but they wouldn't have the same absolute urgency.
Okay, so if we take that clause 6 is the crucial element in here, in that there's a potential for non-compliance, would that non-compliance lead to, if the terminology is infraction, whereby there's a fine?
That is theoretically possible. We consulted and made the Commission aware in an audit here in January last year that this was included, and to all intents and purposes we thought that would be adequate to say, and the timetable would be the timetable that we are the end date to which we were working to, that it would come in within the current the end of the current mandate.
So in January last year, that's 2 years ago.
No, January this year.
January this year, it was said that it would come within this
mandate. And you know, we had no reason to believe that wouldn't be an adequate answer to their question.
And was it not? They were
they
happy
have
with that?
now opened a case to say that they are primarily that they're content that it will deal with the issue, but they're not content with the timetable that was put in front of them, which, as I say, we would say is within most guidance is the time that it will take to take primary legislation through the process, and not allowing for the fact that we couldn't have envisaged that having got executive approval to the final proposals in March of this year, that unfortunately that took longer to take the bill, to have the bill drafted and seek the necessary clearances before.
Why did it take so long?
There were some complications in some of the drafting, but and obviously there's a raft of other priorities that the Assembly has in terms of its legislation, and therefore access to draftsmen and solicitors and the like. But it's just taken longer to get the clearances through to this point.
If we take clause 6 then, take clause 6, would it be possible to take out clause 6 and deal with it on its own in some way or other?
What I'd say is that they obviously we've discussed this with the Art Committee, and that suggestion has been made. It's not in my gift to say that will be the outcome, but certainly it's been taken back to the Minister on that basis.
The reason I say that is that we're coming to the end of the mandate. We've only got really in January, February, and then through to St Patrick's Day, so you're talking about 10 weeks. And there's a huge amount of business still to deal with, all sorts of issues that we've been working on in the committee. And to suddenly have this thrust upon us at a very late stage, I think it's difficult, because it's quite specialised as well. It's difficult for members to give it the necessary attention and focus that I think really is required. And to do that in fairness to all concerned, because rushed legislation quite often ends up as bad legislation. You're not scrutinising it properly, we weren't able to do your job. If there was some way of dealing with clause 6 on its own so that we avoid any potential fines, we don't want that. And other things around that are now not quite as urgent could pass into the next mandate and be dealt with there more thoroughly.
Chair, can I just ask, are you considering either an order in council or legislative consent or some other by regulation way of dealing with this?
Obviously, I would actually ask them, because I'm not sure. I would not. Yes, I'll not be answering the question in terms of those sort of legal processes.
Just got your specific point was going to say, I mean, that is the question that you're asking, and is that on a consideration?
Is there
to do that?
I'd be looking at options to see what would be possible, and what the implications of doing that are.
Well, is there suitable or comparable UK?
It is only, in terms of the UK, it is only Northern Ireland that has. The matter relates to what the EU would see as EU-wide legislation that should be applicable the moment it comes into the EU. But there's a quirk of how the 1967, the 1981 Fisheries, the Sea Fisheries Act is drafted that omits part of the common fisheries policy, and therefore requires us to do more work after to bring it in. So it only applies. It would only apply here. So if there were an infraction case, and we'd avoid that, it would be for Northern Ireland to have to deal with. The actual change in the 66 Act, the change in the bill that Clause 6 deals with is with necessary modifications, an almost exact lift to what is already in place in the rest of the UK.
I thought it was the 1966 Act, so it was the 50th anniversary celebration or something?
It is. It and me share a birthday. The 66 Act provides for some sea fisheries in the inshore, the inland fisheries for which DCAL particularly responsible for, and for aquaculture. But there are other pieces of primary legislation because of the nature of the sea fisheries across our seas, which are UK wide and were drafted in the UK, but have been amended either individually or collectively over the years, including the 1967 Sea Fish Conservation Act and the pertinent one, the Fisheries Act 1981.
Okay. Questions, Basil? Or if you, is it,
Well, it was just,
that was the,
actually, you've taken
right,
it, so that's okay.
Yes, Rosie?
Yeah, just a quick one. The EU legislation, when is compliance necessary?
Again, apologies, it is a sea fisheries issue that has put the urgency on this, and I'm sure my colleagues will bear with me. We were aware that we became aware of that there might be an issue, as I say, and therefore included it in a timetable to bring forward the primary legislation. There is a timetable that the Commission would set out when it becomes the next formal stage, but it isn't there yet. But we thought they would be happy to say that we're writing the problem, and here's what it is, and here's the timetable. The reason they've opened a pilot case is because they're not happy with the length of time that legislation takes to make, which is not entirely in our gift. I mean, accepting that we're at the end of that, the timetable would have been the same for it to be in our hopes introduced before the summer or shortly after it, rather than this week.
Okay, so we're just not in a position yet to know when penalties
Well,
will become.
We have written to them. It would be some time for the process to go through, but it's not something you really want to have hanging over you. And I say there are other things that the bill would include that we would, in time, if not in the short time that's available, need to bring forward to stop further things happening in the future. But you wouldn't want those overhanging you whilst you had a pilot case currently open, I would imagine. But what we've written to them, explaining to them why the timetable is around April 2016 in terms of the Assembly's legislative programme and so on, and we haven't heard back from them yet as to how they receive that. But given that they think that is long, the assumption would be that they wouldn't be that keen if it became any longer and would maybe move to the next stage. If they move to the next stage, you would then have 2 months to comply. But we don't know whether it will ever come to that because, as I say, we're in that discussion with them still.
Thanks.
Just to clarify again,
Sorry, just...
No, go ahead, Chair.
okay, clause 6, this crucial one, that's not within the section we deal with, so that's really a DART issue.
Yeah.
So if they can come to an understanding about how you dealt with clause 6,
yep,
it would make the situation an awful lot easier, because we would then become, it would take a thing off our plate. Okay. Is there anything that, oh sorry, Oliver, right?
Right, if we take you're talking between clause 6 out, and that would leave the rest there, would there be a lot of work and with the rest of those clauses? Pretty straightforward.
If I can maybe pick up on that there, certainly our Minister would prefer that the clauses that we have there would also be put through as well. We are talking about people, we would have about 100 prosecutions a year, so potentially those people would be prosecuted as opposed to maybe having a fixed penalty applied for what is a very minor offence. We have an online service now which is up and running, which allows people from any EU company to apply for a fish dealer's licence. The impediment that they require Justice of the Peace to say that they're a fit person to hold a licence is an impediment. It's a break in the service. It potentially could go down the infraction route at some stage because it's seen as a potentially a barrier. Some of the other key things we have around that in terms of the protection, we currently have the legislation that says if you remove material from a riverbed, you must seek our approval to do so to protect fish stocks. The logical extension is to apply that to a lake as well to protect fish stocks within lakes. We, from our perspective, we see these as reasonably straightforward. We have done a lot of stakeholder consultation on them. There is by and large agreement for the majority of them. The one issue, I suppose, around grids and grills is one where the 66 Act did not reflect current knowledge and scientific information around fish stocks and the different types of fish stocks and how they move and the potential impacts that they will have, and particularly in respect of eels. Eels are covered under EU eel management plans. We currently do not have protection at hydro sites for those species, and it does leave us very exposed on that there, because if we're wanting to meet our 40% escapement target, eels are very long-lived, so it takes a long time before any impact you do has a cumulative effect on that there. But we're certainly very keen to see those through.
So that would be really a major thing for the conservation of the eel stock and the future of the industry.
Absolutely, it would be further compliance with the EU regulation. Yep.
I think, members, given what we're told here, I think if Clause 6 went back to DARD, the rest of the clause, I think we could deal with them pretty straightforward. There's not a major amount of work in it. I think we could do it. And I listened to what you said there, Chair, about taking Clause 6 out and sending that back to DARD, There is merit. And I'd propose that there.
Right. Are there any other points that anyone else wants to make in terms of the element?
Just, Chairman, I must admit I don't know a lot about it, but the gratings there in certain water courses, is there an issue here for the Rivers Agency and so on about? We've obviously very much aware about gratings in the last week and the issues and.
No, generally these are essentially intakes and outtakes, so they take water away from the river, so they're not directly across the river because
the rivers, are they all designated water courses?
No, some of them, there's a variety. Some will be designated, some aren't designated. This is ostensibly where you take water away from a river down another channel to feed a hydro or some other operation, and it's really at the point that you take the water away from the river that it will cause it. But they're generally very small in comparison to the overall river, so it's not that we'll have a flooding issue or anything like that there with them. And again, we have there's provision for exemptions within the Act currently. So what we're saying is, look, worst case scenario, if you have a vertical screen, if we want to protect against eels, we need a certain spacing and a certain size. But if you lower the angle or have another alternative, then we can grant an exemption. And I think currently we have about 20 exemptions granted under Section 59. So we will generally work with operators. And give an example, people will come to us for advice, and because this only applies to new hydros being put in place or new abstractions. Pardon?
It only applies to new.
It only applies to new ones. So we advise people that this new legislation may come into place, and it's been accepted and they've actually installed 10mm grills. So that will be compliant. Sorry, they have already installed 10mm grids, or they have factored it into the overall project.
10mm is a small opening, isn't it?
10mm is a very small. They currently have to provide that a very small mesh at the minute for March, April, May. Now, the issue for us is what is your definition of fine? And my definition of fine might be slightly different to someone else's. They have to do that currently for 3 months of the year. What we're asking is that because of the movements of species like lamprey and eels and that would be completely there the whole time. It removes the need to put on and off a fine mesh, and it makes it easier from our perspective in terms of enforcement, and it certainly brings in the protection for eels and lampreys that we require.
Okay. Right. It mentions our water course includes any pipe, culvert or other device.
Yes, that's essentially just a definition of where you're taking the water off.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, David Hillage.
Thanks, Chair. Can you tell me something about the consultative process with the public on this so far? There hasn't been a consultation on the actual bill as such, is that right?
No.
There was no consultation on the actual bill given the time frame. We carried out a consultation last year now with stakeholders, which went out to about 1,800 people. We received about 57 responses. And we've had meetings with the Hydro Association since that as well. So there's been various correspondence with consultees following the process. Those issues raised during the process led to an amendment of our original proposals. We had about 11 proposals which without the consultation we're only taking forward about 5 of those now because there were legal impediments to the other proposals and because of the concerns raised during the consultation process. So there's been extensive consultation. So by and large what we're taking forward now, all our consultees should be fairly happy, bar maybe the Hydro Association who still have an issue with a 10mm grill, but that particular proposal is based on the latest scientific advice and good practice in fisheries management.
When does the consultation close?
Well, the consultation was actually last year on the proposals, and since that we've been developing the bill.
Right, so we haven't gone to consultation.
Not on the actual bill.
Which again, if you're going through the process, there's a bit of a time-consuming issue.
I think to be fair to the CAL provisions, what was put out in the consultation was fairly clear exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Done. There's very little you can hide in the sort of amendments that they've tabled here that stakeholders wouldn't be very aware of what exactly.
And in terms of the consultation, what to the ones that are relevant to our committee, what was the breakdown of pro and against the proposals?
By and large, those proposals that were taken forward would have had widespread support. And even the 10mm grill was actually raised by our stakeholder forum. That was actually a proposal they presented to the department for us to take forward. So that has been widely discussed among stakeholders. Clearly, as I've said, the British Hydro Association have issues with that because they're directly involved in the construction of hydros, but we've had several conversations with them, and we have tried to put across our arguments, and as I said, they're based on scientific advice from our advisors in AFBI, based on good fisheries management elsewhere.
Okay, that's members.
Right, yeah, just on the consultation, the responses received, we have sort of a list of them here. But I notice there's very few local governments or the councils.
Certainly they were sent out now. In terms of, you have a list of what was received. The list of what we actually sent out would have covered local government. There's actually a local government representative on our stakeholder forum as well. So that stakeholder forum has carefully considered the proposals and made their recommendations to the department.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, and we'll give it some consideration now.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next time.
Chair, if I can just perhaps then update on the bigger process that the committee is currently involved in. A lot of the lead will come from the Agriculture Committee, who are still deliberating. What has been planned is, members are aware that when a committee stage of a bill comes in and committees are scrutinising legislation, they put out a call for evidence. So the call for evidence would be a joint call for evidence. It would go out and it would be both committees. So that again is just waiting for agriculture approval, and we would effectively piggyback that. The other thing that, Chair, that Mrs McKevitt brought up was the councils. In your pack at point, bear with me a second. Point 47 in your table pack. There's a letter there that we're proposing to put out to all the councils about this, because as has been mentioned, the councils have a particular interest, because the vast majority of them, I think, would probably have inland waterways, and there'd be a relevance to them. So that would be an addition to the consultation call for evidence. That would be a specific letter going out to the councils.
But did they not indicate that they didn't really consult? It was last year's information that they were going on, where they put out information last year, but the actual bill they didn't.
Chair, what the process was last year, a consultation was put out on proposals to legislate. So there would have been a number of issues that they sought people's views on that would have led then towards the development of the legislation. From that set of consultation responses, it was indicated that there were 57 responses. They would then have met with a number of those groups to discuss what should go in the legislation. And that's where the bill would have been developed. The bill would have been largely derived from that. But in terms of an actual further consultation on the bill itself, as the officials indicated, no, that hasn't happened. But that's part of obviously what the two committees would be doing in terms of their call for evidence would be seeking.
It concerns me that there's only two councils, Fermanagh and Uriamore, that responded. Now, if we take it on the figures, there was 26 councils in place then.
Aye, especially in Lower Barn, yeah.
Right.
I think Mr. Hilditch indicated.
Oh, sorry.
So what consultation is going to close on the 6th of January?
That would be the call for evidence. So effectively what that is a letter would go out from the two committees to all of those 57 people or organisations who responded to the last
This is the 10th of December, Christmas.
Yeah.
Councils have already met. Won't meet January before 6th of January, I wouldn't hazard a guess.
Chair,
How is that workable if you're doing it proper?
I understand exactly what Mr. Hilditch is saying. I'm aware that at this stage in the session going towards the end of the mandate, in some cases committees have been forced to do a 2-week call for evidence. Timing is not, I'm afraid the timing is not of, Chair, the timing is not of our making, and because of the nature of this, it is.
At the end of the day, this is largely with the DARD committee. They have expressed their concerns to the department and to the minister, presumably. So I think all we can do is bide our time, other than.
One more thing, Chair, I'd like to get members' agreement on.
Yes,
for us to at least have our ducks in a row in terms of doing the scrutiny. So we have allocated some time in our forward programme to bring up groups to give evidence to the committee, and I just wanted to get members' agreement on 3 initial groups to bring up, and then we can see what comes out of the consultation for a 4th group. So the proposal that I'm making is the Ulster Angling Federation, who I gather have worked a lot with the department around issues within the bill, and they are the overarching organisation for anglers. So that would be the Ulster Angling Federation. Then the officials mentioned a number of times that the Northern Ireland branch of the British Hydropower Association. That's the other kind of key group there, is around the issues with gradings and the constructions in rivers and so on. So that would be a second one that I would propose, if members are in agreement, to bring up. Then the third one, I think again was also mentioned by the officials, that's the Salmon and Inland Fisheries Forum. That's quite a wide group that the department itself has brought together, all sorts of different interests, and it encompasses, I think, the vast majority of the sort of stakeholder sectors or groups that would be involved in this. So that would be the third group I'd be seeking for members' agreement to bring up. A 4th group would then come out of the call for evidence consultation on the bill itself specifically. So if members are in agreement, I can provisionally look at those first 3. Ulster Angling Federation, the Salmon and Inland Fisheries Forum, and also then the Northern Ireland branch of the British Hydropower Association. That would cover, I think, pretty much largely the sectors as a first gambit. Now, that is entirely dependent on the Agriculture Committee going ahead with the scrutiny and then ultimately it falling to us. But if members are in agreement, those would be the first 3 that I would look at.
Okay, members content with that?
Yep.
Thank you. That brings us on then to matters arising.
Sorry, Chair. What's the decision on that there? What are we deciding?
We're not deciding anything today because we're waiting until DARD has to write. They've written to the DARD minister.
DARD meets on Monday.
Yes, well then, when they write, I find they've already met and I think they'll be writing and getting they've already written. Yeah. So as soon as we hear from them.
So that's how the consultation will work. It'll come out of whatever decision the ARD committee makes in terms of proceeding. This committee's consideration of the decal clauses falls out of them having the bill, because it's a DARD lead bill. Consideration automatically falls to the ARD committee. They're asking to delegate to us the decal clauses. So that's how this works. So that committee has to do their bit, and then this committee gets its delegation.
We make a decision after.
Once we know what's happening with the bill generally in terms of all these issues around clause 6.
Brings us then to matters arising, and we'll go through these pretty quickly before we lose too many people. Point 5.1, referring members to the response from the IFA, page 73, regarding health and safety issues at Windsor Park. That follows last week's response from the City Council on the same issue, so we have 2. And we also wrote to the Northern Ireland Football League. Their response is still outstanding, and it was agreed that we would consider all responses together. So as soon as we get the 3rd one, we can look at the 3 together.
I think, Chairman, I just mentioned that AFA one, I think, gives us reassurance that they did have a safety certificate
Yeah.
and everything was compliant
We'll
on the
take,
day.
we'll take the three of them
I
together.
appreciate that, but I think it's
Yeah.
important. There was a lot of negativity about this, and obviously false accusations.
We'll not rerun or an advanced discussion. It's something that will come
I
to
think
in
it's
due
important
course.
just to put it on the record that
Okay,
it was,
it's been recorded. That
it was in compliance with the requirements for health and safety, because a lot of things were made
Right,
that were not true. And it's important. It is important, Chair. I know you're busy and you're pushed for time. And
I know
everything,
that, Gordon, and
We've also-
we're also about to lose people. We're down now,
Right.
a couple more, we'll lose a quorum, and then
So
we'll not be
put
able
it on
to
the record.
we'll not be able to do any business. So point 5.2, page 76 from BBC Trust, providing further information. The response contains some statistics around reach and appreciation of BBC TV and radio across the UK. Also included is the list of stakeholders that the Trust communicated with. Further information around BBC capital investments in Glasgow and Cardiff will be dealt with by BBC NI.
Look, Chair, this morning we got a hard copy letter from BBC NI on this, so Sabra is just going to move that round to members now. This looks at Glasgow and Cardiff investments, so one that members had asked about.
Thank you.
So, as I say, we got this hard copy this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great.
So, Chair, it just it hasn't copied awfully well.
No.
But it does in the smaller writing. It does detail the costs and so on of capital.
Just if you look there on figure 1, case example, Broadcasting House London, 991 million.
That was the budget.
That was the budget. Revised development cost 1 billion. Then Glasgow, it was actual development cost was 188 million pounds. Is what it say? They've got figures on the next page. Those are meant to be words in there, aren't they?
We'll email it out to members as well. But
Do we have the original here, Sabra? Okay, it's just that hasn't copied at all clearly. We will.
But what is clear from those is that there's been substantial investment elsewhere in the UK, and that Northern Ireland hasn't really had that. So we'll keep that in mind for any future consultations and meetings with Mr. Hall.
Noted.
Lord Hall. Sorry. Thank you.
We're going to lose a project now.
Because I offended. Okay, brings us on then to musical instruments, page 89. Where do I find that? Page 89. Confirm that the scheme remains on hold. It is now too late in the current financial year to be able to deliver the scheme.
Chairman, I thought we were told earlier it was. You were told
For next year.
for next year, that's the
it was
following year.
included.
They were referring to next year. Then when we asked about this year, there wasn't a clear response to that. Once my department's budget for the next financial year has been decided, I will look again at the reinstatement of the scheme. Funds that were released as a result of the November monitoring round. So it's well, all we can do at this point, I think, is note that.
Right.
Point 54, referring members to the Clerk's memo at page 13 of the table pack regarding BBC Charter renewal. The committee asked the Clerk to bring forward a suggested committee position on the issue, and Peter, if you want to read.
Chair, this is a kind of collection of the points that members have made, discussed. We looked at a lot of different issues around BBC Charter renewal, and members had asked for a draft response, or well, not so much a response, but a draft committee position to be brought forward. That is largely what I've drafted there. I deal with a number of issues. The Memorandum of Understanding that has been signed with DCAL, obviously the committee has already said before it's very supportive of that. That's a first phase of other Memoranda of Understanding that will come in, and I deal with how the further Memorandum of Understanding will hopefully allow BBC to be laying its annual report and accounts in front of the Assembly, and then will allow scrutiny by the committees of the Assembly. With governance and accountability, the committee talked before about the development of a unitary board of the BBC. Currently, obviously, there's a board and then there's the BBC Trust. It would be putting those together and having Northern Ireland territorial representative on that, and then moving on to the development of, in replacement effectively of the Trust, moving on to the development of a Public Service Broadcasting Commission that would scrutinise and regulate the work of the BBC, and that again should also have guaranteed territorial representation from Northern Ireland. The audience councils as well, I've indicated, are important to retain, because without them you don't have the direct input from the licence payer themselves, the actual audience. So it's key that that element in whatever new arrangement comes forward is retained. Then I moved on to public purposes, portrayal, network programming, quotas and in-house production. I reflect on a couple of the public purposes are representing the UK, its nations, regions and communities, and also the one about stimulating creativity and cultural excellence. I went into some detail there about how Northern Ireland isn't particularly obviously portrayed in network programming. There's a much greater need for that to happen, that network programming commissioning needs to be more devolved out, that there needs to be a much greater local input and so on to that. That the physical separation of Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK is manifested in its portrayal in the BBC network programmings. Also then went on to talk about how the quotas are important, because without those the nations won't get investment, and that it helps to offset the clear sort of dominance of the BBC by London and the South East. The 17% nations quota doesn't really address the guaranteed quota for Northern Ireland, so I've dealt with that as well. We'd like to see an agreed level of production for Northern Ireland, and funding for this would actually be then accessed through BBC Northern Ireland rather than a distant kind of unit doing that, so it would actually be brought locally. Then the supporting creativity is where I deal with the issue members have just looked at, with the investment. Northern Ireland has obviously suffered from a lack of investment when you compare to obviously what's been moved to Salford, what's happened in Glasgow, what's happened in Cardiff, where there's been a big investment in production centres. Northern Ireland hasn't had that investment. Now, obviously members recall when we've had BBC NI coming in, they've talked about a future investment, but it would be, beyond the budget, this current budget cycle, and obviously would be dependent on BBC Charter renewal and so on. But it makes the point there that Northern Ireland has the best case of anywhere to receive that investment, because it simply hasn't in the past, and that it could have a very positive market impact on the independent production sector here and so on. Whereas if you have a production centre, you have facilities there that then draw in skills, the skills go out into the wider sector, and you have a facility that effectively, it's that old phrase of, a tide lifting all boats. It also means you have capability being built into the sector and so on. And then I moved on to talk about in-house production. So that's basically BBC producing its own programmes. And after the sort of discussion the committee had, I'd suggested there that, again, access, the production level that's outside the BBC should rise, and that funding, again, should be more accessible to BBC NI. There should be a level of devolution to that. The committee may recall the discussion around the window of creative competition, which allows the independents and the BBC to compete for extra funding. I've suggested that, as part of the wider discussion the committee had, that really doesn't do the independents necessarily as many favours as it should have, and that overall the amount of out of BBC commission production should rise. In terms of funding, I've said that the nations must be protected, because that's part of the BBC's public purpose. It's part of reflecting the devolved dispensation in the new charter period, which hasn't been reflected in the current one. And again, I've said that there's a very strong justification for protecting funding for Northern Ireland specifically, because of the underinvestment there has been in the past, and the challenges that Northern Ireland faces as a society emerging from conflict, and that this is one massive area where the BBC's public purposes could really come into play to deliver interventions that are very positive for the community in Northern Ireland. In terms of the actual mechanism for funding, I've indicated the committee's desire to maintain the licence fee certainly at the present time, obviously saying that other options could be looked at, but maintaining the licence fee at the minute in a very uncertain broadcasting world, because it is delivering what the BBC requires, and it is delivering it as a public funded broadcaster. Also indicating there that the committee would favour the money that is set down for the BBC going to the BBC, and they're not to be top slicing by central government, which has occurred in a number of cases where money has been taken out of the BBC's funds to pay for other things and so on, and that also the BBC itself must have a key role in how a new mechanism for funding would go on. In terms of strategic partnerships, I've referenced the Northern Ireland Screen partnership that already exists with the BBC, and suggested that obviously members will recall that the committee has written to a number of people, including the Director General of the BBC, about support for the Ulster Orchestra. I've written that in as well as another strategic partnership that needs funded on the same basis as orchestras in Scotland and Wales are funded. And that effectively would put the Ulster Orchestra on the same footing as other orchestras around the rest of the UK. And then I've talked about Irish language and Ulster Scots, the importance of the BBC continuing to work with the broadcast funds, because those are obviously leveraging in more money, and that this content must be maintained on television, radio and online, and the committee is suggesting this would be a good time for the BBC to review its strategic approach to both the Irish language and Ulster Scots, with a view to developing a much more strategic direction for it, that again would allow much better conversations to be had about funding and so on. I focused on radio as well, because members will recall from the discussions that they've heard that Northern Ireland's appreciation of radio is a lot higher generally than the rest of the UK. Reach of radio here has not declined in the way it has in the rest of the UK. So obviously the importance of radio services here is really key, and that must be taken into account with any decision that's being taken forward with the Charter. Then talking about seeking Northern Ireland representation on the board of Ofcom, which is another issue that again had been brought up and talked about. So that's pretty much what the response contains. It's really for members now to decide what they want to do.
Members content to forward that?
Very impressive, well done.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you. Well done.
Good
Okay,
man.
so that will
Have
now
a Christmas
go on
cracker.
to the
Keep that man
Secretary of
on.
State. Chair, the other thing I was thinking in terms of members had talked before about doing a BBC Charter renewal debate. I know the committee's massively pressed for time, and there's a huge amount of work still needs to be done. But what I might do with the committee's permission is potentially bring forward maybe a suggested wording for a motion come the new year, and then committee can decide whether or not they can work it into their schedule.
That'll keep you busy on Boxing Day. Huh?
That's it. Once I've eaten my turkey, Chair.
That's
yes,
okay.
I'll get on to that.
Thank you, Peter, for that piece of work. That's appreciated. Sorry, five with a page there. Table pack, we're into now page 21. Response from Ulster GA regarding the Decal Cultural Awareness Strategy. The GA state they wish to see the strategy reinstated as the funding allowed them to engage with numerous groups in the community, and correspondence is awaited from the Grand Lodge of Ireland. C, members' agreement to hold this response until that from the Grand Lodge has been received, since they were the two bodies involved. Okay. 5, 6 and 5, 7, the Minister's NSMC statements on waterways and languages. We've had the statements and we've been able to question her on those, so if members are content to note.
Right.
Chair, just in the previous week there was obviously a statement on the sub-regional.
Yes.
And while it was good to get a question, did we mention about talking about that further at this stage, or bringing anybody to present to us on such a note?
We noted the statement.
We just noted it. We haven't taken any decision to do anything further.
Right, okay. Just it might have been useful to be able to ask a few further questions. You only get the one chance in the
yes,
right, so
that's fine.
Put it in writing.
it's a massive project for Decal.
If we start off with a letter into the system and then what do you think of a briefing from departmental officials on
Yeah, just a briefing that we could ask a few other questions.
In terms of the letter, what sort of questions do you want to ask in a letter to start off with, just to get...
I think further explanation of the various strands at this stage.
How they were prioritised and so on.
I've been at a number of meetings wearing various hats, and it has been difficult just to drill down the exact meaning at times, and there's different interpretations of different strands to it, so it might be...
Okay. Okay, if you could inquire who it would be from the department that would come along to the committee on that, and we can get a briefing on that.
I'll do my best to fit that one into our schedule.
No problem, sure.
Good luck with that.
Half 8 starts.
And we've time.
Brings us then to correspondence. Minister's correspondence, page 92, regarding the Armagh Observatory and Planetarium. The Observatory Board had previously asked DCAL to assist with the restructuring of the Observatory and Planetarium. As has been indicated to members previously, the bodies will be brought together into a single entity with a single CEO and accounting officer, and an open competition for the post is underway. In an interim measure, DCAL have placed Alistair Hughes, who's from within the department, a civil servant, in the position of accounting officer until the recruitment process concludes in the spring, if you're content to note. Point 62, OFM DFM Committee information at page 94 regarding European Commission Work Programme 416, and the commencement of that committee's annual exercise of seeking each statutory committee's EU priorities for the coming year. The OFM DFM Committee will compile these and require inputs by the 22nd of January. Asking members to note then the European Commission's work programme if you do that. Seeking agreement to commission research on potential CAL committee priorities for 16, and that's the usual practice. If you're agreeable to that.
After we'll do some research for us.
Excellent. Keep it busy. Point 63, referring members to the correspondence at page 34 of a table pack from the Minister regarding a meeting with myself about the review of the Ministerial Advisory Group on Ulster Scots Academy. That's been set for the 15th of February, and I'll go on to that.
December.
Sorry, why did I say February?
I don't know.
I don't know either. 15th of December, and plan to attend. Point 64, referring members to correspondence from the Minister regarding the cultural programme and the World Police and Fire Games briefings at page 36 in the table pack. The committee asked about information on years 2 and 3 of the cultural programme provided at the final 5 of the 13 listed briefings. The Minister has indicated that as these briefings were not Hansarded, there is not a written record of the information provided. However, the Minister is confident that officials will have answered questions asked at the time. Well, we'll leave that one for the moment because I think that there's a weariness regarding that issue, trying to get to the bottom of what was or wasn't said to the committee.
Chair, just what SABRA is giving members now, we got again hard copy this morning. Members may recall the committee agreed to write to Libraries NI to Irene Knox, highlighting the TRIPSI consultation. It's a proposal to consult on a successor to TRIPSI, that's Tackling Rural Poverty and Social Inclusion Framework. We've highlighted it to the Libraries NI because they actually got money out of that before, and it was quite useful. So it's just an acknowledgement from Irene Knox that they're aware of that now, and they'll advise us on
So, Chairperson's business, point 71, there's an invitation at page 172 from National Museums to an American Civil War buggy unveiling event to mark the 40th anniversary of the Ulster American Folk Park on Thursday the 7th of January at 12 o'clock. That clashes with the first committee meeting of the new year. So if anyone is intending to leave the committee, desert us that day and head off to Omagh, please tell the clerk. Point 72. Copy of the clerk's email at page 173 regarding the visit of the Director General, Lord Hall, next Monday, the 14th of December, to Broadcasting House at 1 o'clock, not 2 o'clock as previously stated. If you are intending to attend, please let the clerk know.
Apologies.
Referring members to the hard copy table invitation from Arts and Business NI to their 2016 awards ceremony, scheduled for the 20th of January. If you plan to attend, again, could you let us know? And in the forward work programme, Clark.
Sabra's just going to give you that hard copy invitation now. Chair, the forward work programme, members will see, has now been populated right till the end of well, to the end of the dates we're aware of, which is the 10th of March. So we've pretty much populated every meeting now, and we will do our best to get everything that we needed to do done.
Chair, can I have an update on some of the evidence that we still have yet to receive? One of the invitation to Antoinette McKeown, is that still on that phone?
We dealt with that at the start of the meeting.
Oh, perfect. Okay,
Right,
thank you.
yeah.
A lot of it's TBCs because it's a case of not necessarily knowing who we're going to get and that kind of thing, and around the fisheries bill and so on. So I've done as much as I can with the detail that's there. So it's there, but it is heavily populated, and there's still a couple of visits we're going to try and do, but that will always be very much subject to business.
Okay. And then brings us down to the end of the agenda there. Any other business? There's been none indicated. So the next meeting of the committee will be on Thursday the 7th of January in room 30, when research will brief us on the fisheries bill and members will continue to consider the Arts Inclusion Inquiry report. Which brings us to the end of the agenda, and can I wish everyone a very happy Christmas and a very peaceful New Year. And at this point we adjourn the meeting.
This is the